Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 215th meeting of the Audit Committee, Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District, Wednesday, July the 5th, 2023. Can I get a roll call by the chair?
We'll note that the chairs online, all the other trustees that haven't come out are
Okay. Can I get approval on the committee meeting minutes, April the 4th, 2023?
So moved. Second.
There are no comments by the chair. We had internal audit, presentation of the reports. Good morning, Todd.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, we have a lot to go over this morning, so bear with us. You have two reports and the internal audit, our internal audit plan for FY24. I do have Bill, Ron Steinkamp over there across the room here. He's going to help out. And also Bill Godel here. He's going to help out as well. So I'm not doing this by myself today. So we'll try to get this through as quickly as possible. And if you guys have any questions, please stop us and we'll try to answer those questions. We're going to start with the disaster recovery and business continuity audit. I'm going to go over most of that, but if you have any questions or need any clarification, I'm going to try to defer to Bill. Bill has more technical knowledge around the IT area. He's the one that manages our IT audits. So we'll go ahead and open to slide 2 there. To refresh your memory a little bit about this area, the terms business continuity and disaster recovery are thrown around interchangeably a lot, but they're really not the same thing. They're not one and the same. Basically, disaster recovery is a component of business continuity. It's probably the most important component of it is the driver, but it is a component. So just move to slide 3. So a business continuity plan is a broad plan that focuses on the business as a whole. It involves several areas, business impact analysis, communications plan, workarounds, and then including the disaster recovery plan, which is the restoration of IT systems. So the disaster recovery plan is focused on the data and information systems of a business. It's, designed to save the data, restore the data, and restore the systems, basically. So you move to slide 4. So this whole area really has matured over the last several years. You can tell by looking at our little chart there in the middle. The district really got started on this in FY19 and really started planning it. Over the years, they've really improved the area to the point where they actually did testing in FY22 in the spring, which we did review that. Then they did another test in the fall of 22, which is FY23. And that's what this audit is looking at. In the first test, they only tested tier 0 and tier 1. This most recent test, they basically tested all the tiers of the system tiers. And we'll talk about that here on the next page. If you go to slide 5. So the systems are classified into 5 tiers based on criticality as determined by the district. So this most recent exercise, as I mentioned, basically tested tiers 0 through 3, which is all the critical tiers. So they've really expanded the test and they've strengthened this area. Any questions on that? As to the scope on slide 6. So our main focus on this engagement was on the disaster recovery portion, which is again contained within the business continuity program. IT personnel performed again an exercise during the week of November 14th. The scope included the planning and the exercise process, the related results. Excuse me. So this exercise focused on the procedures related to the district's business and network. I want to make sure that that's clear. So the procedures related to operations technology, which is the plant and pump stations systems, that's a separate system. So that was not part of this. We're going to look at that as a separate audit. And we're actually working on that this summer right now. All right, so slide 7. So as I just mentioned, our main focus, getting back to our little circle thing there, was basically on the orange area within the business continuity program. But we did look at the blue part, just not as much. We have a recommendation about that area as well. So move to slide 8. Now, 2 objectives. The overall objectives were to ensure in the occurrence of an unplanned event, the district actually has ability to execute backup procedures and is able to operate critical systems after an event, or during an event and an actual active event. The district is able to recover the business as usual. So we wanted to make sure the procedures are adequately documented, they're adequately designed, they're adequately communicated across the district. Slide 9. So that involves, proper identification, prioritization of the business operations. It involves workaround planning, along with communications and evacuation protocol. So there needs to be testing of the backup and recovery systems, the locations and personnel. And there also needs to be testing of the non-system related restoration process or the workarounds, and just not the parts that don't involve the systems. And that's where we have a recommendation. They need to track the results and learn from those results as they do these exercises. Any questions? Slide 10. Now, how do we go about the audit? As we always do, we met with IT personnel, had a lot of interviews and walkthroughs and so forth. Reviewed the documentation they provided us, the emergency operations plan, disaster recovery plan, the DR tiers, which has the steps for performing the disaster recovery exercises. If you go to slide 11, we did obtain access to the shared file site for the exercise, which is probably where we spend most of our time. There's a lot of material out there. It details everything they did, the results, and how they went about it, and how they reacted, and so forth. So we spent most of our time on that side of all the material. We reviewed and analyzed the steps taken as part of the exercise, the results, the lessons learned, and so forth, and then the plans for future exercises. So disaster recovery has been tested twice already, or two exercises. Actually, they're getting ready to do another. I think they just did another one last week, and we're going to touch base on that as well. But the non-system related part of it has not been tested, so that's our recommendation is going to be around that. Move to slide 12. As far as overall results, we have a satisfactory opinion. We did have identified the one opportunity for improvement, and again, that involves performing an exercise or testing the non-disaster, the non-system portion of the business continuity plan. Move to slide 13. So that's where our recommendation is. So basically, again, as I mentioned, they have tested disaster recovery, the systems part of it. They've had they've probably had 3 exercises by this point. But if you go back to our little circle there, the manual procedures, the procedures that extend beyond the little orange part have not been tested. And most of those are contained in the emergency operations document. They're more manual, involve communication, evacuation, workarounds, that kind of thing. So we recommend that the district perform an exercise of those. And there's various types. You can see at the bottom of the page, there's tabletops, there's walkthroughs, there's full exercises. We're not really going to tell them how to do it, but it just needs to be done. So any questions on that? I think that's all I have for that one. Unless you guys have any questions. If there's no questions on that, I'll move on to the next report, if that's all right. Okay. So the second report is the fraud risk assessment. That's this one here. And I'm going to go through the first part of it, and then Ron's going to take over from me. So if you go to slide 2, so the most recent fraud risk assessment we performed before this one was in FY19. It's part of the FY19 audit plan, let's put it that way. So we had been performing these every 3 to 5 years. So but moving forward, we want to make sure this happens every 3 years. I think it's that important that we do this by clockwork every 3 years. So, the next one will be FY26. So for this engagement and presentation, we did utilize guidance and data from the ACFE. That stands for Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. And Ron actually is a certified fraud examiner. He's a CFE. So that helped with this audit a lot. Slide 3. So what we're talking about here is what they call occupational fraud. Now, occupation fraud is defined as the use of one's occupation for personal enrichment through the deliberate misuse or misapplication of the employee organization's resources or assets. That's the official definition. So there's three basic categories. Asset misappropriations, in short terms, that's theft. Then there's corruption, usually involves bribery or kickbacks or something like that. Then you have financial statement fraud, where you're basically falsifying the financial statements. Now, sometimes these schemes overlap. The perpetrator, when committing a crime, they might use two of these schemes to commit the crime. You move to slide 4, where you see what they call the fraud tree. It breaks each one of these categories down to individual buckets. Again, corruption is based, bribery, conflicts of interest, kickbacks, and so forth. Asset misappropriation, again, various forms of theft. You can see there's a ton of them. I'm not going to go through all of them. Then you have the financial statement fraud. So for our purposes, entity like MSD, which is a government agency, basically, our two main concerns are probably corruption and asset misappropriation. There's just not a lot of motivation to commit financial statement fraud. We're not a public company in that we're not worried about our quarterly earnings. We're not meeting projections. We're not worried about our stock price and so forth. That motivation is just not there. Not to say it can't happen, but it's not as nearly as likely. If you go to slide 5, to further back up that point, you can see the table there. You can see the percent of cases for government agencies or government organizations. Asset misappropriation is 84% of the cases. Corruption is 51%, and then financial statements way down at 7%. Let's move on to slide 6. So starting with slide 6, I kind of want to give you, provide a little support for our. I'm sorry.
Okay, never mind.
All right.
I have a different document.
So on slide 6, I want to provide a little support for our main recommendations so you can see kind of where we're coming from on it. Slide 6 shows how fraud is detected. You can see by far and away that is mostly detected through tips, 43%. The next method is internal audit. As good as I think we are, we're not that good. 15%, only 15% is detected by internal audit. And if you look in the middle, they said 54% of those come from employees. And it is substantially higher when you have an effective hotline in place. Look to the right for that table, and it shows 48%. It rises to 48% when you have a good hotline. So the hotline is very important.
Do we have one?
We do, but we need to improve it. So we needed improvement. We made some improvements. So we need to make it better. So we'll talk about that. So to further cement this idea, you can see on the slide 7, when you have a hotline, even when something does happen, it reduces the amount of loss and the time of the loss. Now, slide 8 shows the reported mechanisms that are used by people who provide tips. You can see the most used mechanism is a web-based online form. That's probably easy. They just for people. I think people generally prefer to do that. They don't want to talk to somebody. They don't want to make a phone call. They go on hit the link, go to the website, and put their report in. I think most people prefer to do it that way. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But that's one of the steps we're going to take to improve our website. You look down by the right-hand corner. You can see the use of a hotline form of reporting increases when there is training around fraud prevention and awareness. It goes drastically up. So again, training is also important. If you go to slide 9, so this contains a list of kind of I would call best practices for preventing or detecting fraud. It actually shows cases where fraud did occur and when the control was in place and when it was not in place. You can see when it's in place, the damage is greatly more contained or reduced. So for what we're going to recommend when we get to it, Ron will talk about it. We have a hotline to get to your point, Mr. Wabi. We need to improve it. We need some policies. We need to add some training, and we need to improve our kind of organization over the area. And we'll talk about that later. Any questions? We'll skip slide 10 and move on to slide 11. So as far as the scope on this audit, all the employees of the district were included. A couple of the members of the board were part of the audit. It did involve identifying and evaluating, as of December 31st, occupational fraud risks existing across the district. If you move on to slide 12. So our goal, our objective was to assess and report on the overall fraud prevention awareness programs, which is kind of where our opportunity improvement is in that area. So that program should educate employees on the types of fraud, responsible for reporting, avenues and mechanisms for reporting and so forth. We want to report on the overall tone set. I think the tone around it is really good. So that's something that was very positive. We wanted to report on district process control structures as it relates to the prevention of fraud and detection of fraud, and then reporting on the specific risk areas. So move on to slide 13. So how did we go about this? Again, we conducted a fraud risk assessment, basically generally asking questions, what are the risks? Where are these risks? How is the district addressing the risks? What anti-fraud mechanisms or programs are in place? So specifically, we conducted surveys with management and employees. We considered management employees anybody above the supervisor level. So we sent out 55 of those. We got 40 back, so 73% responded. For non-management employees, again, that's supervisor and down, we sent out 876. We got about 40% responded. So we had a pretty good response. We did conduct individual discussions with executive management, all the directors, I think even some of the assistant directors. And I think we met with a couple of the board members to discuss this area. And then when anything came up or rose to our attention, we investigated and formed follow-up procedures on it to see if we could find further evidence or clarification on it. Any questions? So as far as the overall results, if you look at on slide 14, you can see there's a table where we assess the risks in the different areas. So it is our assessment that the district has taken steps to reduce its overall fraud risk to a moderate level, which is acceptable. You can see the table mainly green and yellow. Now, the one area we are concerned about is the overarching program. Overarching fraud awareness prevention program, that needs some strengthening. That's why that one is red. Now, this table will never be all green. It's just not reality, but we obviously want to get rid of any of the reds. So they have taken steps already. So I think as of today, I think we're in pretty good shape, and we'll talk about that. So move to slide 15. So we have generally satisfactory opinion. Again, it's generally satisfactory because of the one item that we consider to be significant. So Ron's going to go over that, and we're going to talk about our recommendation. Go ahead, Ron.
Oh, okay. I thought you had me starting on slide 21.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Did you still want to do that, or you want me?
No, you're on slide 16, right?
You want him
I
to
can
start
do
on
slide.
slide 21? He thought you were carrying him.
Yeah, you had your name up to that point, but I'm good if you want me to.
All right.
Okay, I'll go. Great. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. First one there, opportunity for improvement is on fraud awareness and prevention programs. So if you look, the district's done a good job over the years with putting some controls in place, making sure you've got a good program. There's just some more things that need to be done. First of all, it needs to be a standalone fraud awareness and prevention policy that currently is not in place in the district. So that's something that we encourage. You also need an annual ethics and fraud awareness training that's not conducted by the district right now. Also, there are no district personnel that have been assigned ownership of the overall fraud awareness and prevention program. So you really need that person or that area that really is assigned that ownership that can take it and run with it. And then we did, as Todd mentioned, we did some surveys, and based on those results, 37% of district staff respondents, 20% of management respondents were unaware that the district has an anonymous process in place, or that hotline that Todd mentioned, for supporting fraud and ethics violations. So that's something we definitely want to do a better job on. So if you go to slide 17 then, the recommendations which really follow along from what I just said. First of all, the district needs to develop a standalone fraud awareness and prevention policy. They need to hold annual training for all employees. It's important that you train all employees on fraud regularly. You want folks to be aware of something they might see and how to report it, where to go to if they see fraud or the potential for fraud. So if you go to slide 18, please, then. Just continuing on with the theme there, assign a senior member of management that responsibility of overseeing the fraud awareness and prevention program. Again, that's a key. It's critical that you have somebody that's got that ownership. And then take steps to further publicize the district's anonymous process. Make it well aware to folks that this process is in place. Put on the intranet, monthly newsletter, district video messaging boards, things of that nature. So folks are aware that you've got a process in place and they.
That's me.
You?
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay.
We're two old guys. We can get our stuff to straight here, so. So as far as steps to, this, as I mentioned, I think we're in a good place today. The steps have been taken to address this. So we have developed 2 new policies that have been published. They're out there on their intranet. Those were put out there last week. We have assigned a personnel from management to oversee this program. There will be Secretary Treasurer. He's very excited about this new opportunity.
Don't ask for a raise.
But we're in the process of developing training. I've been working with the training personnel and HR off and on for the past couple months. They should have that finished at the end of July. That will be used in the onboarding process, and annually everybody will be required to take it. We have improved the existing hotline. We did add an online mechanism to where they can just click on it and report. We improved the presence on the intranet page, moved it to the main page right in the center of the page, and actually added the link there and added a link to the internet page as well. And we're in the process of developing some blogs and some more digital messaging to explain this information to all the personnel at the various sites. So, moving to slide 20, you can see those are 2 policies that we have completed. They're pretty thorough. They're 3 or 4 pages each one, so we've tried to cover everything very thoroughly. If you move to slide, this is the second slide 20. I caught that yesterday. So. If you see the top left corner, that's what's on the intranet page. We've added the link. It's right in the middle of the page so everybody can see it. And to the right, you see the internet. We added the link there as well. Those links take you down to that reporting page down in the left-hand corner. That's what the reporting page looks like. It's pretty slick. It's very easy to use. We can message the person back and forth. It makes that easier. Any questions on that? So go to slide 21. So this is our second item. It's a combination of items that we identify strictly through the survey process, but we were unable to obtain further evidence to support the items, so to speak. But we do think they're important enough. We didn't want to overact and write a recommendation that didn't make sense, but at the same time, we did not want to ignore these items. So we tried to find that middle ground, and I think what we did makes sense, and Ron's going to go over those.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. Yeah, so first of all, in the conflict of interest policy, the good news is that the district does have a conflict of interest policy that does align with state statute. That's great. But something we saw during the surveys was, folks, and it was 5% of staff and 3% of management responded and noted that there are or could be employees who appear to have outside business interests that may conflict with their duties here at the district. So that's definitely something that we want to take into account and be concerned with because, again, that's something that we can't have per the conflict of interest policy and state statutes. So the recommendation there is, continue with, in slide 22, I apologize. If the internal audit recommends that the district continue training employees on the principles of conflict of interest, So we want folks to understand that, they have an outside interest, outside duty, responsibility, work, something like that, that can't conflict with the duties here at the district. And, we hopefully can do that through the training. We've got a good conflict of interest policy, but folks need to know what's in there. So that's the recommendation. Any questions on that? Great. And then the 2B part of this is vendor relationships. So,
Excuse me. Quick.
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
were these references to 5% of survey response staff and 3%? Were those just the highest number?
Yeah, for those particulars. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, and vendor relationships then again, based on the survey response, it was noted 11% of staff and 3% of management respondents expressed concerns with district employees may have, or at least appear to have, close associations with vendors, contractors. And again, that's getting back to the whole idea of corruption. We want to avoid actual corruption as well as the appearance of corruption here at the district. So if you go on to slide 23, the recommendation there, again, is, as mentioned above in 2A, continue training employees on the principles of conflict of interest policy. Along with that, train them. And hopefully there's an understanding that you have a business conduct hotline, and along with training the business conduct hotline and training folks on that hotline, they'll know and when to take action and when to report things, and know what to look for, basically. Any questions on that one? All right, if you go on to slide 24, please. There's a third part of this observation, that's 2C, related to overtime, hiring, promotion, safety, and program processes. So, again, there were some survey comments, small number of survey comments that expressed concerns related to overtime hours, process around those overtimes, as well as amounts, and the procedures for hiring and promoting employees. And it was kind of interesting on the diversity and inclusion comments that we saw. There were some that said the district didn't make enough efforts, and there was just about as many that said the district made too many efforts in this area. So, it's something we want to look at. We did look at some demographic information, and it looks like the district's doing a good job of tracking that. And we saw really no anomalies from that perspective. So that's a process for procedure for hiring and promotion. And then safety process, there was, we've done safety audits before, and this seems to be a theme. We saw themes consistent with that, and really no actions beyond the previously issued recommendations in the safety audit pertaining to safety program. So if we go on then, slide 25, if I can flip the script here. Just our recommendation there is we did perform some limited additional procedures related to overtime and hiring promotion practices, as I mentioned, but really found no reportable issues that we could substantiate. However, internal audit has not performed full-scale engagements in those two areas in the past. So our recommendation is that basically to internal audit is that we include full-scale engagements in the next audit plan to include reviews of overtime hours and dollars, as well as the adequacy and fairness of processes and procedures utilized to hire and promote employees. Any questions?
Okay, if there are no questions on that, we'll move on to the audit plan, which is this one here. So this is the audit plan, risk assessment, internal audit plan for FY '24. Let's go right to slide 3. And just to give you a heads up, there's some slides in the front part here. I'm going to skip over. I like them having the document, but I don't think we need to go over them for our purposes here at the meeting. So I like to have them in here. So just to be aware of that. So this slide here is just external auditors versus internal audit function. I like to explain this a little bit because a lot of times there's confusion as to what we're doing and external auditors are doing. That's Clifton Larson. They basically do the financial audit package. And so their main concern is the financial statement, the process controls around the financial statements. we're not nearly as concerned about those. We're getting the weeds in the different areas across the district. We're not nearly as concerned about what's going on around the financial statements. Not to say we don't care, but we know Clifton Larson is strictly focused on that. So we don't try to duplicate efforts there. So I want to kind of refresh you guys' memory on that one. Any questions? So let's move on to slide 5. Talk about the risk assessment methodology. Basically 5, 6, and 7 kind of go together. So basically when we do this, we take into consideration various inputs and evaluate those inputs, you know, recent events, anything that's going on, more construction, more debt. Ron just mentioned we had some surveys that brought up some things that was considered when we did our evaluation. Look at the prior engagements from prior years and what was the coverage, when was the last time we audited something. We hold discussions between ourselves with external auditors. I did talk with the management here, all the directors and so forth. I did reach out to the board members and see if they had any thoughts on it. So this way, took all the information and evaluate it, identify the risk in the different areas, and line up the audits. So, and then we present that to you guys. So now, if you guys have any suggestions or do something you don't like about the plan, certainly let us know. We're definitely willing to adjust our plan to meet what you think. So we go to slide 6. You know, to document this process, we have a big spreadsheet. Basically, we assign points based on these various factors. So we assess the overall risk for an area, give some points on that. The date of the last audit. How long has it been since we did the last audit? What were the results of that last audit? Was it a really bad audit? So that would garner more points, obviously. And any recent development factors that come up, you know, like something come up in the survey, that's a good example. And we assign points and develop totals and basically the areas with the most points to get on the audit plan, so to speak. Any questions? So slide 7 is just something I use. I use this with the directors and for ourselves to see, just help us eyeball the different areas, all the areas we hit within the different departments, make sure we're kind of not missing anything. So we can see we had a lot of coverage. Probably the one area that looks kind of a lot of white there is legal, because we don't audit that. You know, that's a moderate risk area. The only thing we do there is audit the what's that? Legal? No. We audit their administrative processes. So we don't get involved in their cases or anything, but that's just something we do. We're going to do it this year, but we didn't have room. So we're going to probably do that next year. So any questions on that? So with that, let's move to slide 12, all the way to 12, which is going to be our first engagement on the audit plan. And we're going to let Ron take that.
Thanks, Todd. So as Todd mentioned, we're on slide 12. So the first engagement we've got listed there is an emergency construction repair contracts audit. Process owner there would be engineering. And what we want to do from a general perspective is when the criteria are met for emergency situations or conditions as defined in the purchasing order, that's really the focus. And then the area was last reviewed in 2017, 2018. So some of the risks that are involved there, we want to make sure district policies and procedures for these special situations are adequately designed and adequately implemented. So we're not only got good policies and procedures in place, but we're following those from an adequacy perspective. Specific areas we're going to look at: the emergency declaration process, the vendor and contractor selection process, contract structures and pricing, and then procedures for monitoring contracts and the management of those contracts. Any questions on that one? Great. So if we go to slide 13, then the next audit would be a review of overtime activity and processes. And as we previously mentioned in the fraud risk assessment report, this is one of the areas that fell out, was the overtime activity as a concern. So the process owner there is HR and operations. The area has never been the sole focus of an audit. We have looked at overtime when we've done the fraud risk assessment in the past, or when we've done a payroll audit, but never as a sole focus. The risks there procedures to review, approve, and monitor overtime activity are not effective or adequate, and that overtime may be abused by district personnel. They fabricated or exaggerated hours or reported unnecessary hours. So those are the risks we want to take. Any questions, thoughts there? Great, thank you. If we move on to slide 14 then. The next area, and again, this fell out of the fraud risk assessment. Again, this is a review of hiring and promotion processes. This would be looking at the process owner would be human resources. Area has never been the sole focus of an audit. Again, that recommendation came from the fraud risk assessment. The risk here would be the procedures to hire in or promote district employees are not designed and implemented in a manner that results in a selection process that is fair and effective. Some specific areas we're going to focus on include initiation of the process to fill a position, processes to identify and or locate candidates, the application of the process itself, as well as the evaluation and selection of the applicants for interview, the interview and related evaluation procedures, and the final evaluation and selection decision procedures. Any questions on those? Okay. We go to slide 15 then. The next engagement would be a review of the treasury function. Again, the process owner here is Treasury. This area was last reviewed in fiscal year 20. There have been some additional debt issuances and various investment activities since last engagement. Some of the risks we're going to focus on here is making sure the Treasury function is compliance with district and state policies and guidelines, and that processes and related controls are adequately designed and implemented, related to how the district funds and assets are managed and safeguarded, the debt activity and how that's managed and monitored, and ensuring that transactions are reported accurately, completely, and timely. Any questions, thoughts on that? Great. Slide 16 then. The next audit would be look at the bond issuance post-completion, or post-issuance essentially. Looking at the compliance related, again, the process owner is Treasury. The area was last reviewed in fiscal year 20. There have been some additional debt issuances since the last engagement. There are some compliance requirements related to each of those debt issuances that we would take a look at and see the three categories they fall in there. And then there are, within those requirements, there are four main areas of accountability that we'll be taking a look at: the expenditures, the accounting for investments, the accounting for use of finance assets, and accounting to bond holders. The risks that we'd be focused on there are ensuring the policies and procedures in place are adequate to ensure district remains in compliance with the various post-issuance requirements attached to these numerous debt issuance, and that there's a process in place, management policy in place to comply and ensure we're complying with IRS and SEC regulations as well as any state requirements. Any questions, concerns here? Great. Slide 17, and I think we're passing it back over.
Yeah, that's going to be Bill here. I just want to say one thing about the treasury. So those two treasury audits kind of go together. We just split them apart. It makes it easier for us to kind of keep them organized. But we basically have Team A and Team B going at the same time, kind of working at the same time. So when we do those, you'll see them together when we finish them. So I think Bill's going to handle the next item here.
Yep. The next three items are really IT related. The first one we have here on slide 17 is a network vulnerability attack and penetration test. This is an engagement we do perform every year in the spring. What this does is it simulates anything an internet hacker or an inside threat could exploit within the network. So this is the best kind of exercise to really measure, could the district get hacked? And we've performed this for the last, how many years is this? Fourth year we're doing this.
Yeah, it's 14. Yeah.
Yep. So some of the current threats we face today, a lot of ransomware you see in the news. We test for a lot of scenarios that may lead to ransomware. And we're planning to continue this in spring of 2023, or next year.
Yeah, 24,
Yeah,
it'd be 24, yeah.
Any questions on slide 17? All right, slide 18. We have cloud security. The district is moving some of its critical systems out to the cloud. The cloud is offloads some security responsibilities on the vendor. There are still shared responsibilities between the district and that vendor when it comes to security, and the point of this audit is to make sure that those shared responsibilities are understood and being performed. Any questions on slide 18? Great. And the last IT one we have on here, number 19, is the IT service desk. We last performed this in 2020. The service desk is same thing as the help desk. Call in to reset a password, order new equipment, things like that. Where the point of this audit is to make sure that there is a process in place to prioritize requests and that they eventually lead to some sort of action or remediation. Any questions on number 19?
Okay, so I got the next one. So the next item on slide 20 is miscellaneous business expenses. Those really had to do with credit cards and reimbursements of employee business expenses, petty cash. I'm not sure do we still have petty cash? No more petty cash. I wasn't sure. We had petty cash last time. So petty cash is gone, which is good. So last time we did this was the fall of 2019. So this area, all the departments participate in this area, but it is managed, by finance. So it does involve miscellaneous purchases, employees, reimbursement of employee business expenses and so forth. So the risk here is just that we're not properly monitoring and managing these expenses. These assets are not adequately protected. We're violating our travel or business expense policies and so forth. It doesn't normally involve big dollars, but there is always that kind of reputational risk. Obviously we don't want one of these areas to be abused. So that's why we want to make sure we're kind of staying on top of this area. Any questions? Slide 21 is the billing call center. Now this area is another kind of a new area, not new in general, but something we haven't really audited as a sole focus. The call center is managed and operated by a third-party service provider. So when a customer calls, that call, that's the number. The number I have listed there is the number you see on the website. This is the group that will answer the phone. If you have a question about your bill, you're moving, you got a new account, or whatever your question is about your bill, this is the group that answers the phone call and tries to assist you. So there's a few risks here. First of all, non-compliance with the contract. But then we want to make sure the procedure are adequate in addressing, addressing the needs of the customer. So is the group acting professionally? Are they informationally accurate? Are they informationally complete? Are they taking the appropriate steps in the system to address the customer's question or request and so forth? Are they escalating when they need to? Now, questions they can't handle do get escalated up to our personnel on the fourth floor. I just should have mentioned this group is housed on our second floor and next to IT. They have their own room by themselves. So that's where they operate out of. So just so you guys know. Any questions on that? The next one on slide 22 is the operations call center. Same idea here, but this call center is operated by MSD employees, actually personnel of the operations department. They're actually housed on the other side, on this floor, on the other side of the building. So this call center handles all the sewer questions, requests. You have a backup, you blocked inlet, there's flooding. So this group handles those. They create and manage the service requests, which are basically work orders. They take and process the initial information for backup financial assistance. So the risk is similar, except there's no contract involved. Are they reacting timely and expeditiously? Is a service already created? Is the claim created applicable? You know, is they provided adequate information to the customer? You know, again, are they being professional and courteous, that kind of thing? So, you know, are they monitoring these service calls, making sure nothing falls through the crack, that type of thing. So, any questions? All right, so 23, review of SOC reports. This is a new one as well. So I guess first question, what is a SOC report? A SOC report is a service organization control report for a third-party service provider. So we have a lot of third-party service providers. As good examples of what Bill just mentioned, we have the companies of our contractors that are providing our cloud capabilities. That's a third-party service provider. The company that provides our billing system is a third-party service provider. We're getting ready to move our payroll out to a third-party service provider in the fall, I think, or next year. So they're going to be doing our payroll. So it's very important that these companies have good controls and processes in place. So what a SOC report is, it's where an independent CPA firm forms an examination, which is basically an audit of the service organization controls and processes as they relate to the service that they're providing to the user entity, which is us. So these reports are very helpful in gauging whether this particular contractor has good controls in place on process or having weaknesses and so forth. So what we want to do is make sure we're reviewing these every year for these important contractors. Now, they get reviewed when we audit, and some of their processes are take a peek at them sometimes, but we want to make sure these are reviewed every year on a consistent basis. That's what this new program's about. So, any questions? Last item, overhead rates. This is something we've all been looking at. This is where we review the overhead rates that are part of the cost plus contracts that engineering has with some of the consultants. They adjust their rates every year, so we just want to make sure here they're calculating them accurately and not throwing in extra costs in the cost pool to jack the rate up, so we make sure we're not getting overcharged. So we just review those every year. So any questions on that? All right. So that should be it. Slide 25 is the completion of the 23 plan. So we'll be finishing up the 23 plan as we start the 24 plan. We always overlap these. Check and penetration we'll have ready in August. As I mentioned, we just did that in spring. So that went well, just so you guys know, no major issues for that. That's always good news. Active contracts, September, collections process, September or October, and then we have the plant pump station, which we're working on now. We'll have that ready later on. Guys, anybody have any questions? We appreciate the time.
Okay, thank you, Todd.
Thank you, guys.
Next meeting, tentative date, August 1st, 2023. Adjournment, please.
Move
So
adjourned.
Second.
Thank you.
Trustee Evans will get things moved out and get ready to go as quickly as possible for the next meeting.
We're out.
You are.
Okay, we got a trustee Watson, I believe, is.
Oh, I'm sorry, missed that.
He disappeared.
A 292nd meeting of the Finance Committee. Can I get a roll call, please?
I will note that all trustees are present, including trustee Fair, who is online.
All right, do we have a motion to approve the minutes? So moved.
Second.
Okay, first thing is the actuarial report by Milliman.
All right, I'd like to introduce Bill Winningham from Milliman. It's the first time he's been in the building for a little bit, I think.
Yeah, probably since COVID.
Yeah, so welcome to Bill. He's going to go through the actuarial report and also the GASB 7-8 report, which covers. I know these are two long reports, so Bill's going to let Stephanie know from you what page we're on.
Yeah, I'm going to start out on page 4 based on the page number in the bottom right-hand corner of the page. There you go. Yeah, so at the top of the page, you can see a summary of the contribution requirements for last year and for this current year. It went up from 12.3 million to just over 12.9 million. The main reason for this increase is the return on assets being lower than the expected 6.25% return. So on a market value basis, we had a return of negative 14.6. And as your actuary, I look at that more as a negative 21% because you were supposed to earn 6.25, but you lost 14.6. But for funding purposes, we smooth these gains and losses over a 3-year period. So on that basis, our return was a positive 2%. So we followed up 2 strong years with a negative year, and that evened out to a 2% return. Moving ahead to page 5, the next page, we have a breakdown of the gains and losses on an actuarial basis. As you can see at the top of the chart, the biggest loss was the $14 million loss on the actuarial value of assets. The other entries are relatively small gains on salary increases lower than expected for the year, mortality experience more severe than expected during the year, and then sort of a potpourri of small gains on other sources. Following on the following page, page 6, we have a 2-column summary of the key valuation results. As this plan has been closed for several years now, the active headcount is decreasing as expected. It went down from 396 active employees in the plan to 349. Our retired membership went up 22 from 701 to 723. On a market value basis, our assets are 290 million. For a funded percentage of just under 75%, that's down from 91 from the year before. Again, that's that 20% loss impacting that there. And then on an actuarial basis, it went from 87.5 down to 85.9. Moving ahead 2 more pages to page 8. We have a summary of the income and disbursements from the plan on the asset side. You could see the contributions were made of 12.3 million, which matched the actuarial requirement. And looking down under disbursements, that's countered by 22.4 million going out as benefit payments. So this plan, being a mature closed plan, is in the position where the contributions coming in are less than the benefit payments going out, which is what you would expect in a plan like this. Following page 9 is the development of the actuarial value of assets. This is where we smooth gains and losses over a 3-year period. As you can see on that page, near the bottom, the actuarial value of assets of 332.8 million compared to the market value of 290.1. That means there's $32.7 million in deferred losses that are going to roll into the plan over the next 2 years. Going ahead to page 11, this is where we develop the actuarial required contribution for the year. At the top of the page, you could see the total benefit obligation of 420 million. So that's for all past and future service. When we pull out the future normal costs, which is the value of benefits being earned between now and retirement for active employees, we have an accrued liability of 387 million. From that, we subtract off the 32.8 million in actuarial value of assets, leaving us an unfunded liability of 54.5 million. And that unfunded liability is being paid off in amortization periods as gains and losses arise over the years. And those payments are on a 20-year schedule. So the current year payment towards that unfunded liability is 8 million, as you can see under the line item 7. To that, we add the normal cost, which is the value of benefits being earned by active employees during 2023 of 4.156 million, to get a beginning year contribution requirement of 12.16. When we add interest to the end of the year, that's 12.92 million contribution requirement, and that represents 45.5% of payroll for those same active employees.
Excuse me. So the unfunded actuarial accrued liability, the 8 million, are we funding that too, or that?
Oh, that's the payment towards the unfunded of 54 million.
So that's, well, we pay that annually?
Yeah, that's the annual amortization.
In addition to the 12 million?
That's part of the 12 million. So we add to that 8 million, we add the 4 million, which is the benefits being earned during the year for 1 year service for active employees.
Got it. Thank you.
So on the next page, I won't go into this in details, as a landscape page, but it has all those gains and losses over since 2008 when this policy was put into place. And you can see, you add up the amortization payments, it comes down to the bottom of the $8 million. So of that initial liability, when this was unfunded liability, when this was established, the liability is 28.4 million. The balance on that initial liability is all the way down to 8.3 million. So that's getting paid off and as expected. So I wanted to go ahead and jump ahead to page 24. There we go. So this is an age and service chart of your active population. So of those 350 actives, it breaks them down into 5-year age and service buckets. The darker the blue color, the more people you have in that cell. Just wanted to point out that for people in the retirement age category, which I'm defining as 55 and above, you have 163 employees that are already past age 55, and then you have another 64 that are between 50 and 55, many of which could retire immediately due to the rule of 75. And then going ahead to page 26, we have a reconciliation of the membership count from the prior year to the current year. Started out the year with 374 active members. 32 of them retired. 4 of them went from under age 65 to over age 65, and then we had 9 terminate vested. So that's the breakdown of the 45 decrease in the active head count. Retired members, we started out with 841. We added 45 retirees that came from both active and vested termination members. We had about 27 deaths to bring the bottom line for retirees and payment, and that includes beneficiaries of retirees who passed away, to 862 people. That covers everything I wanted to go over in the funding valuation. Is there any more questions? All right, moving ahead to the other valuation, the GASB 6768. This valuation is for accounting purposes, and for the most part, it has the same liability numbers as the other reports. The main difference here is that you're not allowed to smooth assets like you are for the funding valuation, so everything's done on a market value of assets basis. On this report, starting out on page 5, this has a 10-year history of the actuarial determined contribution requirement, as well as the contribution actually made by the district. And for the entire period, the district has made the actuarial contribution. And then moving ahead to page 13. This page has a sensitivity analysis of the discount rate. So that's the rate used to value. Letting them get caught up on it. Yeah, so. Okay, she has up on the screen now the 10-year history of the contributions showing that they were made. So the next page is page 13. And I want to bring your attention to the table at the bottom of the page, which shows the sensitivity to the discount rate. So the district's current discount rate, which is the interest rate we assume the assets are going to return, and for which the future benefit payments are discounted at, is 6.25%. On that basis, we have an unfunded liability using the market value of assets of $97.3 million. If we were to assume the discount rate was 1% higher at 7.25%, that unfunded liability would be 61.4. And likewise, if the discount rate was 1% less at 5.25%, the unfunded liability would be $139.4 million.
Do you have any recommendation as to whether that 6.25 is the correct rate to be at right now, given the performance in 22?
Yeah, that's we're still very comfortable with the 6.25%, because actually with fixed income rates starting to come up, that's right in line with what our models show. And even so, with this plan being closed, it's going to become more conservative over time. So even though interest rates have come up a little bit, I'd probably recommend staying right at that 6.25, because eventually you're going to get to the point where you're all retirees and you're going to be more and more into fixed income and less into equities. We've done it. Tim's done a good job of kind of keeping ahead of that discount rate and moving it down as the plan becomes more mature. By mature, meaning retiree heavy. And those are the main things I wanted to cover on the accounting report. I did want to bring up one topic that's going to show up in next year's valuation. There's been a change to the actuarial standards of practice that will be effective for the next funding valuation, which requires the disclosure of a low duration risk measurement, which means kind of a mark-to-market measurement. So we would be providing a second liability measurement just for disclosure purposes. It wouldn't be used for calculating the contribution requirement, but it would be based on, likely based on 20-year municipal bond interest rate. So we'd be looking at something more like a 4% interest rate number to show what that would look like. Sort of similar to the sensitivity analysis we're providing in this report, but it actually, with current fixed income environment, it'd be a little bit less than that, 5.25.
Questions, Bill? All right, Bill, thanks for your time. You're welcome to stick around for the rest of the meeting.
Yeah, I'll probably go and do a little bit more work this morning.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, good to see you.
All right, is there if I take over there for a question?
Yes.
All right, so next I want to talk about two proposed SRF loans. We've got, all right, so these are loans. Right, so we have three loans on the 2023 intended use plan for the REP program. We're talking about closing two of them in August, so then here in July. Right, the intended use plan is put together every year by the state. It was adopted last November, and then earlier. Total is $630 million in loans that they're on their fundable list. That's the most I've ever seen. That's a function. Closer. Okay. That size is a function of a lot of the federal funding that's coming from some of the programs. So we have three loans on the plan. We're ready to close two of them. One of them is on the books for $35.1 million. We are only need 25.8. After bids have come in, it's going to cost a little bit less than the initial estimate. 25.8 million. It'll also include a $2 million grant program proportion. We also have what's on the books for a $10 million loan. We're only going to ask for 8.5 million in loans. There's another one grant program. At the third that I mentioned, we have 260 million on the intended for the project. Not closing that. Thank you. Oh, that's better. On the next page, as I said, we've got a fine screens project. This is the $25.8 million loan. We'll be installing fine screens to replace certain equipment that's used to grind up larger chunks, make them smaller, easier to treat. Also replace some of the infrastructure around those. It's just falling apart due to aging. And then we have an ongoing program. The $8.5 million loan with the $1.5 grand is what we call the Public I&I Reduction Program. This is actually phase 8. This is an ongoing program where we are rehabilitating sewers, primarily using cured-in-place piping. So we are ready to fund the next phase of that one. These SRF loans are going to look just like all of our previous SRF loans. Really, the biggest difference we have between these are just the dollar amount. But we've got the same kind of covenants that we have really in the senior loans as well, but these are all through the state. There are optional prepayment options, although typically these are a really low-cost loan, and so these are not loans that we would refinance typically. We typically refinance senior bonds. On the next page, just a summary of the financial terms. Most SRF loans are 20 years. I'm asking for only 20-year loans on this one. We can go up to 30 years, but with an interest rate bump. We have a subsidized rate, so the loans from this fund generally get a 70% discount to what would be considered a market tax exempt rate. So So for modeling purposes, because we need the accountants to prepare reports saying that these fit within our coverage covenants in the bonds, we usually set a little bit higher rate for modeling. So we've set 1.5%. But if I were to close these today, I think they'd be closer to 1.25. So we've got a little bit of room in case rates go up over the next month and a half before we can close these. There's an annual admin fee of about 0.5% that gets added. So I look at the all-in rate as the addition of that admin fee to the rate on the loan. So right now we'd be looking at something under 2%. That's what we expect, under 2%. We have just a few $100,000 of cost of issuance combined for these two loans. I estimate, again, that 70% subsidy is a big deal, because even on these loans, which are not really big loans for us at 25.8 and 8.5 million, over the life of say an alternative or hypothetical tax exempt loan, these will save 20 million in financing costs. So that's why we like to use the SRF program. We're the largest user of the SRF program in the state. This is generally the best option available for us in federal funding. I know we'll talk about federal funding later, but most programs we're not eligible for. This is where we get the best bang for the buck. Principal repayments will start in a year for one of them, 2 years for the other. SRF is a little bit more paper intensive than going to the capital markets. There's some monitoring by the state, ongoing reports that we provide, but obviously those are big savings we're talking about. Next page, I won't spend a lot of time on it, it's just the schedule. So this is what the principal and interest schedule is going to look like. So roughly, in between 2.1 and $2 million on average per year for these two loans combined in principal and interest over 20 years. Next page, just talk a little bit about the debt authorization. So we're still working off the $900 million debt authorization that voters approved in 2016. We will be getting to the $500 million here shortly. So previous issuances that have come from the 900 is a WIFI loan for close to 50. We've already issued about 300 million of SRF from that 900 and over 470 million of senior bonds. So the 900 million is just about exhausted. We will have, after these loans close, we'll have only 93 million left of the 900 million, and then we'll start into the 500 million authorization with plans to go back to the voters next year for more debt authorization. Next slide, I've already said this, but the plan is to introduce these in July and then adopt and close the loans in August. And then we'll provide an update on what the final interest rate was to the board after those close. The other terms won't change, but the interest rate is not set until the closing date. Any questions on the SRF loans? All right, I've got just one more item, and that's the monthly portfolio report that we look at. So I am going to start in the upper left. For the second month in a row, we've actually drawn down on the portfolio pretty significantly, about 30 million we've used or lowered the portfolio this month. So that's a total of 90 million over just the last 2 months. 2 months ago, that was because of debt service payments that were due. This month, we had a lot of capital payments for projects. So 90 million down. That's kept us from being able to increase the yield to maturity in our portfolio because we haven't put new money to work. We've been using it instead to pay for projects and debt service. So our yield to maturity over that 2 month period is only up like maybe 15 basis points. The Treasury rates, though, have gone up quite a bit, about 75 basis points over those 2 months. So if you've seen the yield curve of interest rates, the short end is really high, back end not as high, which is good for borrowing and is good for investing if we had money we had coming due that we could put to work. But so the benchmark obviously turns over every month, so that goes up a lot faster than ours does. Over in the sector allocation, which is just compliance with our policies, we are in compliance. The commercial paper, which is what has been maturing the last couple of months, is down. I usually like to keep that closer to 20 because that's where we get good rates for short-term investments. Although treasuries and Fed agency rates are actually pretty decent right now too. Those are up a little bit just because we've drawn down on the commercial paper. The fund summary at the bottom, the only thing really to note there is that we have no more debt project funds. So all of the senior debt that we've taken out in the past, we've drawn all those funds and used them, put them to work. So we don't have anything additionally right now. The loans that we have planned coming up are the SRF loan and another WIFI loan. Which the nice thing about those are they are lower rate, and we only pay interest on those as we draw them. So there's some benefits to those kind of debts. The nice thing about senior debt is that we can use it for any projects, not just a specific project. So it's a little more broad. And then maturity distribution, there's nothing different there than what you've seen in the past. We keep about half of our portfolio is pretty current because we're using it to pay for things like debt service and capital projects operations. Any questions on the operating portfolio? All right, Trustee Watson, that is all I had for the Finance Committee meeting. I'm sorry, Trustee Evans, sorry. I'm back on audit.
Not a problem. So next tentative meeting date is August 1st. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Thank you.
Trustee Wilson will get things switched out and be ready to go for stakeholders.
Thank you. Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to the July Stakeholder Relations Committee meeting. Can I get a roll call, please?
We will note everybody's present and Trustee Fair is online.
Thank you. I have one note. I'm going to modify the agenda, need to modify the agenda to add President just before we adjourn the meeting. Remarks by the President. Can I get approval of the committee meeting
So moved.
May 30th?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, the first item is, or the next item is discussion by Ms. Coleman regarding several ordinances. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Trustees, I'd like to bring your attention to proposed ordinance 16182. This is for the district's classification plan. The purpose of this particular ordinance is we're going to add some additional job descriptions, new job titles to the positions that we have available. The positions that we're going to be adding this particular time is the information governance specialist. It's going to be a C2. That's a non-union position. The diversity program administrator as well will also be added. That's a C2 non-union position that will be added to the classification. Are there any questions about these two additional positions? Okay. Next, please look at proposed ordinance 16179. This is for our insurance brokerage and consulting services for the liability insurances we have here at the district. We typically use a broker to help us secure those insurance packages, and they help us facilitate the purchase of all of those insurances you typically hear me talk to you guys about around May or June. This particular contract will be with Thomas McGee. The contract provides those insurance consulting services and broker services for the district that I mentioned. The contract is for 1 year with 4 option years. This ordinance will exercise the district's first year of those 4 years that I mentioned. This will start September 1st, 2023 through August 31st of 2024 for roughly about $70,000 each year. Are there questions about this particular service, our new brokerage, broker for our liability? Okay, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman. The next ordinance will be presented or discussed with Ms. Meyer.
Thank you and good morning. Proposed ordinance 16178 will authorize the district to enter into a contract with Quarles and Brady LLP. They are a new legal firm coming to St. Louis. The contract will allow Travis Kirby, who is presently at Armstrong Teasdale, but is planning to move to Quarles and Brady. This contract would allow Travis to continue to represent the district in ongoing employment litigation and counsel the district on a discrete accommodation and disciplinary issues as he transitions from Armstrong Teasdale to Quarles and Brady. With this approval of this ordinance, it would allow the district to enter into a sole source contract with Quarles and Brady for those specific areas for Travis to continue his representation of the district. I am planning to go out with an RFP early this fall for our general litigation or our general legal services contracts. If y'all remember, just last month, you authorized the continuance of the last option year for those contracts. We have 4 general legal services contracts. So the plan would be to go out this fall with another RFP to secure the general legal services contract. So this sole source contract is to kind of bridge that gap until we make another selection. Quarles and Brady will honor the hourly rate and other conditions that Travis has under the existing contract with Armstrong Teasdale. Are there any questions?
I have one, and it's probably a question from a position of ignorance, but is there any issue that we need to be concerned about between the companies, between Armstrong Teasdale and Quarles Brady?
No, Armstrong Teasdale had sent me a file transfer form. And so that file transfer form is very specific about which files Travis will take with him. So, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. President?
Yeah, Chairman Wilson and trustees, just want to provide some information on the storms over the weekend. So the area over the weekend, depending on where you were at in our service area, so 1 to 2.5 inches worth of rain. That equates based on averages to 1 week to 3 weeks worth of rain on average that we would see in the St. Louis area. And I know as I sat up and watched the weather radar, like I'm sure Brett was doing all night, it looked like what we usually saw as storms moving through is somewhat refreshing compared to what we see in the past. I want to let you know how the system reacted. We had 31 reported basement backups from the sanitary sewer system. 29 of those were not MSD's responsibility. There were situations with either the laterals or the private systems before it got to MSD systems. In only 2 of those instances were there overcharged mains, and those individuals reported they'll be eligible for the maximum $2,400 reimbursement for any damage they saw. So just speaking for me, and I'm going to take the time to speak for Brett, it was nice to see what in the old days used to be a normal storm system going through the area. But we did have up to 2.5 inches, and the system reacted very well. And I just thought with everything that's been going on the past year and a half, it would be refreshing to report that to you.
Does anyone else have anything for the good of the body? If not, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So move.
Second.
Okay, thank you. It's a pleasure of my life again.
Trustee Nikozis, we will get everything switched out and be ready to go.
Yes, sir.
Morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the 244th meeting of the Program Management Committee, Wednesday, July 5th, 2023. Can I get a roll call?
Yes, we'll note all trustees are present, including trustee Fair, who is online.
Thank you. Approval of committee minutes, May 25th, 2023.
So move.
Second.
Approval of committee minutes, May 30th, 2023.
So move.
Second.
Thank you. There is no comments by the chair. Engineering Department agenda items.
Good morning, trustees. Fairly healthy agenda today, so feel free to stop me if you have any questions. Also, if there's anybody from the public, we do have a sign-in sheet. It's kind of hard to get used to post-COVID that we have people from the public, so last time we missed some folks, so if you could sign in if you're here for program management, I'd appreciate it. All right, first item on the agenda is CSO volume reduction green infrastructure grant for Tower Grove Park basketball courts. This ordinance authorizes the district to enter an agreement with the Board of Commissioners of Tower Grove Park, provide a financial assistance through the Green Infrastructure Grant Program for construction of green infrastructure. The purpose of the project is to reduce combined sewer overflows into the river to Pear per the long-term control plan. This project will reduce runoff with the installation of 2 bioretention basins. The total cost of the project is estimated at $1,028,752. The Board Commissioners of Tower Grove are requesting $118,800 reimbursement for the 2 bioretention basins. In your packet is a map showing the location. Obviously, it's in Tower Grove Park near Central Cross Drive and Arsenal. Some new facility being built there, and they're going to drain those into bioretention basins that'll capture the water before it enters the combined sewer system. Next item is the CSO volume green infrastructure grant for 2422 North Sarah Street. This ordinance authorizes the district to enter an agreement with Eternity Adult Daycare, LLC, to provide financial assistance through the grant program. The purpose of this project is to reduce combined sewer overflows to the Mississippi River per the long-term control plan. This project will reduce the runoff with the installation of 1 bioretention basin. The total cost of the project is estimated at $124,200, and Eternity Adult Daycare is requesting reimbursement of that $124,200 for the cost of the bioretention basin. This project, as you'll see from the map, is in the north city, north of downtown at North Sarah and North Market. The redevelopment taking place there, and they're adding a bioretention to capture their runoff from their parking area. And then again, we'll capture that water before it gets to our combined sewer system and assist in reducing those volumes. All right, the next few items were construction jobs bid this past month. First one, Burning Tree Infrastructure Repair Project. This appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into a construction contract. The work to be done consists of construction of approximately 133 feet of sanitary sewers varying from 15 to 16-inch in diameter. The purpose of this project is to repair a sagging pipe under a concrete channel in the city of Florissant. The district received 3 bids on this project. Tailor-Made Construction was the low bid on the project. The bid was slightly above the design estimate, and our appropriation of $370,000 is below our original budget for the project. Tailor-Made is committed to just over 17% MBE African American on the project, which meets our 17% goal. Next project is the Gravois Creek Sanitary Trunk Sewer Relocation and Stream Bank Stabilization. This action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into a construction contract. The work to be done consists of construction of approximately 1,800 lineal feet of sewers from 8 to 42-inch in diameter and approximately 28 lineal feet of storm sewers, 54 to 72-inch in diameter, and the construction of approximately 200 lineal feet of natural channel stabilization. The purpose of the project is to remove an exposed section of the existing graboid trunk sewer, and move it out of the creek, protect it from erosion and potential inflow and infiltration. The district received 7 bids for this project. Our low bid was from Kelp Contracting. The bid was below our designer's estimate, and our appropriation of $2.2 million is below the budget for the project. Kelp Contracting is committed to just over 17% MBE African American on the project, which meets our 17% goal. Next item is the Dade Avenue North Storm Sewer repair. This authorized staff to enter into a construction contract. The work to be done consists of the construction of approximately 674 lineal feet of storm sewers from 12 to 24 inch in diameter. The purpose of this project is to upgrade an existing storm system to alleviate street flooding along the 400 block of Dade Avenue in the city of Ferguson. The district received 6 bids for this project. The low bid was from Fred M. Luth and Sons. The bid was slightly above the estimate and will be encumbering $426,000, which includes $60,000 for utility relocation and contingencies. And we'll encumber that from our fiscal year 23 infrastructure repair funds. So we're not appropriating any dollars. We're utilizing existing dollars from previous appropriation, but we are authorizing the contract. Fred M. Luth is committed to 17.3% African American participation, which exceeds our 17% goal. Next item is the Trenton Avenue channel improvements. This action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter a construction contract. The work to be done consists of the construction of approximately 300 linear feet of rock bank stabilization, a wing wall, and appurtenances. The purpose of the project is to alleviate stream bank erosion occurring along a reach of Spencer Creek parallel to Trenton Avenue in the city of Overland. The district received 6 bids for this project. The low bid was from 2 Alpha Contracting LLC. The bid was below our designer's estimate, and our appropriation of $160,000 is below the fiscal 24 budget for the project. 2 Alpha is committed to approximately 18.8% MBE African American, which exceeds our 17% goal for the project. The next item is an introduction and adoption. We'll be requesting next Thursday. It's for the emergency repair number 73 at Hanley in Manchester. The work to be done under this emergency contract consists of the excavation and replacement of a collapsed combined sewer and appurtenances. The purpose of the project is to repair and replace the sewer that failed, making repairs necessary to both the sewer and a manhole. The repair is approximately 25 feet deep and located in the slope of South Hanley near Manchester, requiring shoring and restoration of the hillside. Utilities, Deer Creek is adjacent to and downstream of the failed sewer. Based upon recommendation from staff, the executive director declared this project an emergency on June 9th. The contractor was J.H. Barra, was selected per our emergency declaration policy. The repair was started, and I'm happy to say that the repair is complete with except for restoration at this time. So the restoration will take a month or so to get completed. In your packet, you'll find a drawing showing the location of the project in the middle, the large, if you're familiar with the Manchester and Hanley, this is an area real near across the creek is where the Brentwood Bound project was done. And then, if you're looking, this is going north just before you get to Manchester. There was a new bridge that was replaced in that area to the north as well. To go, the upper left-hand corner was identified with sewage in the creek. We dye tested to determine that it was a collapse of a sewer. We mobilized. Obviously, there was an extensive amount of traffic control. Hanley's a very busy intersection, Hanley and Manchester. Top right picture is kind of the repair being made. You can kind of see the slope that you're dealing with there with the seeing how small the people are in the picture. And then in the lower right, the sewer repair had been made coming into that manhole, into the hillside, and they're preparing to restore the concrete channel bank that was there before. So it was pretty treacherous. Bear responded quickly. We were able to get the leak. It was leaking sewage, which required a cleanup from our operations crew. I'm sorry, I apologize. Originally, we estimated when we declared an emergency because of the steepness, not knowing exactly how much shoring, we thought the repair might cost as much as $1,500,000. Right now, we're looking for an appropriation of $500,000. Any questions? All right, the next I'm going to kind of take in groupings. The next group of projects is the River to Pear Tributary and Upper River to Pear CSO controls and Lower Merrimack system improvements. This action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to amend existing design contract. The actual next two projects are what we refer to as watershed design contracts. There were long-term contracts that the district initiated with consultants back in the 2012 and 2013 fiscal years, basically at the start of the consent decree. These watershed contracts have allowed for the design of the many projects that we've had. Basically, these are management contracts where we're hiring the consultant to manage multiple projects under each one of the contracts. When we originally started, there were 8 total watershed contracts. 5 of those were for design consultants. 3 of those were for construction management. 3 of the design contracts, all new work has been completed. There is some construction that's ongoing, but there's no new work for 3 of those consultants. Most of that work is out in the county area for the SSO work. We've done the early compliance requirements of the consent decree. 2 of those, which I'm going to talk about today, are primarily for work along the CSO program and major tunnel projects. There are 3 construction management contracts. We bring those construction management contracts to the board, usually later in the year. Back to the HDR contract. There are a total of 8 projects. The first one being the management of the program, the River to Pears, and she'll be paging through these separately. I've got them condensed to one for myself. Is the River to Pear Tributary and Upper River to Pear Controls Improvement Project. This is actually their payment for the management of the overall program that they're administering. There were dollars left in the contract, so there's no appropriation for this particular contract during this fiscal year. But we'll be requesting authorization to amend that contract. Second project is the Claytonia Creek Sanitary Relief Project. This is a lump sum project for the pre-design of approximately 7,600 feet of 8-inch to 30-inch diameter sanitary sewers and appurtenances. The next project is the CSO Brentwood and Redbud Avenue outfall elimination and sewer separation. This is a lump sum cost project for the design of approximately 14,700 feet of 8 to 30-inch diameter sanitary sewers and combined sewers, public and private I&I reduction, and including additional separation of the sewer system. The next project is the Hampton Creek Sanitary Relief Deer Creek Trunk to Oxford project. This is a lump sum cost for the pre-design of approximately 5,800 lineal feet of 42 to 78-inch diameter combined sewer, 1,100 feet of 60-inch pipe and tunnel under Highway 64, and approximately 2,600 feet of vertical wall channel to be restored. The next project is the Hymos Pump Station Force Main Replacement Project. This is a lump sum project cost for design of approximately 2,100 lineal feet of 12-inch diameter sanitary force mains and 2,010 feet of pipe and tunnel and appurtenances. The next project is the Lower Merrimack Improvements Baumgartner to Fenton Tunnel project. This is a lump sum cost project to design of 35,700 lineal feet of 96 diameter sanitary sewer tunnel. This project is currently under construction. These are for services during construction. The next was for the Merrimack Bottoms Pump Station project. It's a lump sum cost for the design of approximately 3,400 lineal feet of 6 to 30-inch diameter sewers, and this is to eliminate the Merrimack Bottoms Pump Station, and it will tie into the Lower Merrimack Tunnel. And then finally, Upper River to Pear and River to Pear tributary storage tunnels. This is a lump sum cost project to provide planning assistance for evaluating alternatives for the pre-design of approximately 32,000 lineal feet of 18-foot diameter CSO storage tunnel. Again, this is a major phase of the CSO program. It's a tunnel that will run from River to Pear up into University City and capture combined sewer overflows that eventually end up in the River to Pear. The total appropriations for the projects that I just went through is $5,110,000. As far as the MWB participation for the projects, right now there was a commitment at the beginning for this overall program being administered by HDR of 20% for the duration of the program. Right now, their MWB participation, all the individual participation for the projects are listed on the forms. I didn't go through those each individually, but right now, with these amendments that we're going for right now, their participation is at 36.28, which is far exceeding that 20% commitment that was made originally. There is a map in your packet that shows where these projects are located. Again, if you have any questions, make sure you let me know if there was any more. So are there any questions on the HDR packet of projects? All right, I'll move on to the second one. This is the Lower and Middle River to Pear CSO control improvements. It is authorized, appropriates additional fund and amends contracts for Jacobs Engineering Group. There are 4 projects total. One is for the project management portion of the project, and then 3 individual projects that Jacobs is currently working on. On the Lower Middle River to Pear project, again, provides watershed consultant management services, and there's an individual appropriation of $650,000. The second project is the Lime number 3 pump station and force main. This is a lump sum cost for the design and replacement of an existing pump station at our treatment plant. It includes work with Ameren, Missouri, and demolishing the existing Lime 3 pump station, the Martigny pump station, and the Jefferson Barracks pump station. This new pump station will serve the Jefferson Barracks tunnel, which is currently under construction. It will drain to this, and this will be the new pump station that serves that Jefferson Barracks tunnel at our Lime wastewater treatment plant. The next project is the Lower Middle River to Pear CSO storage tunnel. This is the continue the design of the approximately 9-mile, 30-foot diameter CSO tunnel, which will run along River to Pear, and it'll capture CSO overflows along River to Pear. This is our next major capital construction project that we have online that over the next few years we'll be getting our easements and moving forward with that project. And then the next one is Upper River Repair Tributary Storage Tunnels. This was a project that HDR is designing, but Jacobs is providing some modeling support. They control the overall model for the entire river repair, so they're providing some modeling services for that large tunnel project. In total, Jacobs, we're amending contracts for a total dollars for fiscal year 24 of $3,450,000. On the MWB participation for Jacobs and the contracts that I just mentioned, their original commitment on the program was for 22% of the overall program. After the amendments that we'll be approving, their total participation will be slightly above that at 23.27% of the overall engineering design program. Are there any questions on the Jacobs projects? All right. Moving on to a few individual design contract amendments. The first being the Mississippi Floodwall ORS Pump Station Rehabilitation Project. This action appropriates additional funds and authorizes staff to amend a design contract with Black & Veatch. The services preparation for 30% design build project delivery solicitation for the Mississippi ORS Flood Wall Pump Station Phase 4. The purpose of this project is to rehabilitate and replace deteriorating components of the St. Louis Flood Wall Protection System that are operated and maintained by MSD. Black & Veatch will also provide advisory services during the design, construction, and startup. The advisory services include make sure the project stays on track, schedule, and within budget. The preliminary cost estimate for this Phase 4 is $10,917,000. The actual work that's taking place, we're replacing a large closer gate, sluice gate at our Gimlin pump station, and on the Mill Creek, which is our largest pump station, replacing 3 roller gates, actually 4 roller gates, and then 2 sluice gates that are like 8x8. So those are large sluice gates that have deteriorated and difficult to operate and maintain. Our total appropriation of $1.2 million is equal to that proposed in the budget supplement for fiscal year 24. And again, the appropriation includes the design project delivery solicitation documents for the Floodwall ORS Phase 4 and advisory services during construction. This is a multi-year project with Black & Veatch. Their original commitment was 25.21 MWB participation. With this amendment, they'll be running at 28.31, which is above their original commitment. This Black & Veatch was originally procured when the district did not have an MWB goal, so those are commitments without a goal. The next one is the Bissell Point trickling filter media replacement. This appropriates additional funds and authorizes staff to amend a design contract. Amendment number 4 with Jacobs Engineering for design of Bissell Point trickling filter media replacement Phase 2 project. This project consists of removal and replacement of corrugated PVC media and liners within trickling filters 1 and 2. The scope also includes miscellaneous repairs to concrete walls, duct support, and support grading associated with these 2 filters. The purpose of this project is to replace filter materials which have exceeded their useful life and must be repaired to maintain the current level of operation. This is actually Phase 2 under Phase 1. Over the last several years, we've repaired and replaced the 4 other ones. There's a total of 6 trickling filters at the Bissell wastewater treatment plants. Our appropriation of $150,000 is equal to what was in the CIP for fiscal year 24. The original commitment for MWBE by Jacobs was 33.87. With this appropriation, or with this amendment, their overall participation for MWB will be at 36.13. Again, this was procured when the district had no goals for professional services. So we've exceeded those numbers. The next item is pump station repair improvement design contract C. It appropriates funds and authorizes staff to amend a design contract with Crawford, Murphy, and Tilley to provide design services for projects included pump station repair and improvement contract C. This is a lump sum project for the design and preparation of construction documents for multiple pump station and improvement rehabilitation projects. Design consists of 5 different pump station project locations. Purpose of the project is for renewal and replacement of assets that have exceeded the design life. On your write-up, it includes a total cost of $3.14 million in construction for those 5 pump stations. This is a supplemental appropriations. Most of this work has been completed. That appropriation of $50,000 will be used for design during construction services, mostly review of shop drawings and approval of those shop drawings during construction. Original commitment by Crawford, Murphy, and Tilley was 34.16. The overall after design and with this additional 50,000, they're going to be at 24.51, which is under what they originally committed. My guess is there were probably some changes made during construction that maybe didn't allow for the full use of the MWBE. But like some of the others just before this, there was no goal at the time. So we, with the 24.51, we've exceeded the no goal scenario. So any questions? Next item is the CCTV inspection and physical inspection of sewer contract for 2023. This appropriates additional funds and authorizes staffs to amend the contract. This ordinance enters into amendment number 2. Is the first option year with ACE pipe cleaning. The purpose of this contract is to provide district staff with information regarding sewer condition by the use of CCTV, physical inspection, and sewer cleaning. These inspections will determine sewer conditions and will form the basis for preventative maintenance activity, inflow and infiltration investigation, and our sewer system models. Sewer cleaning is also performed as part of this duty. After this amendment, the total contract appropriation will be $6 million. This appropriation is for 3, being the second year. And this is the first renewal. There's one more renewal after this year, and we'll re-procure this particular project. There was an original commitment of about 12% MWB originally. Right now, the contract's running at 1.47. But again, there's 2 more years to perform this work. Any questions on that one? All right, the next 2 are municipal grants from our OMCI programs. One for the Deer Creek OMCI and one for the Coldwater Creek OMCI. The first one being Deer Creek OMCI reimbursement for the city of Des Peres. This ordinance authorized the district to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Des Peres for eligible stormwater expenditures where revenue is collected by the Deer Creek OMCI subdistrict. The eligible stormwater expenditures include the following: storm sewers, inlet construction, drainage improvements, stream bank stabilization, erosion control, clearing under bridges or cleaning detention basins, stormwater planning and or engineering costs, and other stormwater related expenses as determined appropriate by the district. The city of Des Peres is recommending the Brook Bend Drive drainage improvement projects. They're requesting a total of $39,773. The city will contract construction to install new curb inlet piping that will tie into the existing storm system. The estimated cost for the design and construction is $39,773, and this will provide for the reimbursement of that $39,773. We do not appropriate dollars for this. The original dollars for this were appropriated in fiscal year 23 and 22 previously, so they're utilizing money that has been available to them for the last 2 years. Any questions on that one? Next one's for the Coldwater Creek OMCI reimbursement for agreement with the city of Florissant. Authorize the staff to enter into agreement with St. Louis County for eligible stormwater. Hold on here. That's a typo there. It's actually with the city of Florissant out of the Coldwater Creek OMCI. The city of Florissant will be constructing the Lindsay Lane and Florista Drive storm sewer. The city will contract for the construction services to construct 300 lineal feet of storm sewer and appurtenances to address intersection flooding. This agreement follows an earlier agreement with MSD for design services for this particular project. The estimated cost of construction is $89,525. This agreement provides for that $89,525. The funding for that will come out of a previous board action for the Coldwater Creek reimbursement program. Any questions on that one? All right, the last agenda item for next Thursday is the Sims Avenue Storm Buyout Project. This appropriates funds related to the purchase of property demolition related activities and authorize staff to acquire property without additional board action. The voluntary buyout of the property in the 2200 block of Overland will allow for the removal of improvements and reestablish the overland flow path. The existing sewer is under the structure is deteriorating. The buyout option was recommended due to the costs and topography of the site. The costs associated with purchasing the property outweighed the cost for relocating the storm sewer, and the home would still be in the overland flow area. So there's a document that shows the location. We'll go to the map first. On one side, you'll see we have a facility over to the left on Lackland Road that discharges to an open channel, and it is captured right in the middle of the document into a sewer. It's a 24-inch, it's a 48-inch concrete pipe, and it ties into the system on Sims. So it's directly underneath the facility. If you turn to the next drawing, you can see the actual open channel. And as you can imagine, that storm sewer is only capable of taking typically about a 15-year storm. So if you have a larger storm event, all that overland flow is basically going to try to go right through the house. And removal of the house was our best option. So we're requesting approval of appropriation of $200,000 from the University OMCI subdistrict and proceed with the acquisition of this property. All right, if there's no questions, then that concludes the engineering department agenda items.
Thank you, Rich. Under other business, we have a follow-up presentation on Bissell and Lemay Fluidized Incinerator Project.
All right, thank you. You should have a copy of the presentation sitting in front of you. After the meeting today, we'll forward electronic version, and there's also a supporting document, a multi-page technical review that is the basis for this presentation. We'll forward that to the board as well. Following today's meeting, we won't be looking through that individually, but everything that's in that document we'll be covering today in this presentation. This presentation, again, is being made really to provide additional information. We had a previous presentation on a special program management meeting on May 25th. There's been numerous questions, inquiries, and suggestions, both from the board and a number of community stakeholders. We felt like it's important to address those. So that's what this presentation's really all about today. Next slide, please. Again, the agenda item for discussion is the Bissell and Lee fluidized bed incinerator. Our initial action, which is currently scheduled for the meeting next week to be considered by the board, appropriates funds, the first installment of $101 million for total project costs of $900 million for appropriation. It will also enter into a contract with Kokosik Plocker LLC for the design build contract. Next slide. The presentation will include, this is the agenda I've kind of given. I'll cover a little brief background, kind of tell us how we got here today. The purpose of today's presentation I kind of covered already. And then we're going to go into a question and answer type presentation where we're going to ask the questions, kind of how we received them and the comments, and try to address those each individually. And members of my staff are going to cover most of that. Brad Navoy is going to cover the cost, some of the cost questions that have come regarding the project. Brad is my assistant director over my design division. Then Jay, there's been a number of questions and considerations of the options that we looked at before making our decisions. Jay Hoskin, he's my assistant director for environmental compliance and probably the most knowledgeable on all the different types of ways to treat biosolids in this area. There's also Brett Berthold will then talk, and he'll talk about why we're proposing, why this project needs to be done now, and then our recommendations. And then finally, Mr. Holscher will have some closing comments. Next slide, please. As you're aware, we originally introduced the initial appropriation of the contract awarding to Kokosik Plocker back at April 13th. At the board meeting, this item for adoption was held. We held an initial special program management meeting. We gave some presentations, gave a presentation, answered some questions. We held it at the June 8th meeting again to offer some time to fully vet the proposal. And then we're here today giving the second presentation. And again, this agenda item is scheduled to be considered for adoption on July 13th. At this time, if there aren't any questions for me, I'll turn it over to Brad, and then we'll continue on. All right, Brad.
Good morning. As Rich said, my name is Brad Nevoy. I presented to you several times on this project. Today, I'd like to discuss the increase in the project costs that we have seen. Complex projects of this nature, next slide. Complex projects of this nature go through a process of evolution as they go through the different stages, all trying to find the best solution for the public. This project, due to its complexity and the scale, faced many challenges. There, you can hear me a little better. A detailed study was performed in 2016 and 2017 to help better define the best solution for the public. At the completion of that initial study period, early conceptual estimates for the project were $360 million. That was in 2017 dollars. And that's what was used to approach the EPA about a consent decree modification. In 2018, MSD was granted a CD modification related to the implementation of a new air emission standard that resulted in the need for this project and for the additional spending to fund this project. MSD began the development of the final solution in 2019. This began with the selection of an owner's representative team of industry experts to assist in further defining the project scope and help in the design build procurement. Two major factors affected the overall scope and subsequently the cost of the project. The first major factor was the overall solids volumes increased. The owner's representative team, in conjunction with MSD staff, conducted a detailed analysis of the actual solids volumes that are currently being incinerated, along with our future needs for the project. This was especially influenced by the solids volumes experienced during the extreme high Mississippi River levels experienced in 2016 through 2018. Ensuring the ability to react to differing conditions caused by fluctuations in the Mississippi River significantly increased the needs for both the solids handling equipment and the incinerator sizing. The second major factor that impacted the scope was operational redundancy. While working with the owner's representative team of experts on the final scope, it became apparent that the operational redundancy was not considered in the conceptual estimate. Ensuring that the project scope has adequate incinerator capacity to account for efficient incinerator shutdown to allow for maintenance of the equipment is essential. This resulted in an overall increase in the number of incinerator units at both plants. Based on all the data we had in 2020 and incorporating these scope modifications, the owner's representative team put a project estimate together of $575 million at that time. This was the estimate that was used when the design build procurement started in July of 21.
Next slide.
Next slide.
Thank you. Beyond the scope changes during the procurement, during the procurement of the project, the construction market went through a period of considerable instability. This instability resulted in the risk for bidders who were guaranteeing their price, which resulted in increase of overall project costs.
Brad, I don't understand the scope modifications and what the river levels have to do with that.
Sure. When the Mississippi River goes up, we
Right.
see a different mix of solids that come
So
to
it's
our plant.
coming through a stormwater, not the.
Well, our system that serves that
Right.
area, a lot of it is a combined sewer system. So it is influenced by the river. We see higher flows. Go ahead.
Maybe just, this is Jay Hoskins. I'm with him at Environmental Compliance. So what happens when the river comes up is that the flows into the treatment plants come up because, and Abyssal in particular, because the flood wall of the city is connected to the treatment plant. And so as the river levels rise, then the flows coming to the treatment plant rise. It also changes the characteristics of the solids coming in. So they become much more, silty, clay, inorganic, and that's what causes those changes. So we'll see our biosolids productions increase by 50 to 80%, depending on what the river's levels do in an annual year. It can change that much.
Okay.
And Jay, while you're there, I think the capture component of our CSO program to capture flows instead of distributing, we will in the future also be capturing additional flows on top of that and feeding them back into the system. So we're expecting those kind of flows with those low volatility type components, sludge components, also generating more biosolids we have to treat.
Why is that? Just because.
Well,
2 tunnels.
Go ahead, Jay, if you want to, or you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
I'll back you up.
So we're capturing the flows that would normally discharge, and you're right, these are coming through inlets. These are coming through the grit and debris that's coming off yards and streets and everything else that's going in. We're capturing that. Where it used to discharge to the River to Pear or Mississippi River. So we capture that, and when the storm's gone, we will slowly feed that back into the system. Not just the volume of mostly stormwater, but also all these additional solids that aren't really biological in nature.
Got it.
Okay. Jay, did I get that right? Okay.
Very good.
So I should mention, we will stop at the end of each section if you have questions, but no, thank you. Thank you for that question. So beyond the scope changes that we seen during the procurement of the construction project, the market went through a period of instability. As I mentioned, the contractors are being asked to guarantee their bids and that had an impact on their overall bid value. The market instability showed up in several different ways in the 2+ years prior to the design build team submitting their proposals in December of 2022. 5 main factors were impacted by this market upset. Materials. There was not only an increase in material cost, but the lack of availability of materials during that period was a concern. Supply chain, extensive delays in getting specialized equipment, in particular for this project. We still see those delays now. Labor, lack of availability of skilled labor, which in then turn resulted in a higher labor cost. That kind of feeds into the next one. Construction market activity. We still see in our sector a considerable amount of market pressure. There's a lot of work still out there. And overall, a construction cost escalation. We've really seen costs go up across the board, and we're going to show you some of that here in a second. Again, in 2020, the owner's representative put the estimate together of $575 million. In the previous meeting, we showed you a CBRE construction cost index to show those impacts. Below is a chart that will further demonstrate these impacts. This is an Association of General Contractors, or AGC index, that is very spot on for our particular industry. Based on this data, the 2023 base cost estimate would have increased to $848 million, as shown. Ultimately, the lowest price proposal that we received was $899 million. That's about 6% higher than the AGC numbers would have generated. While the market has begun to stabilize, prices are not going to recover to the pre-pandemic levels for most of the things that we deal with. Jay's going to talk a little bit more about why this project needs to be done now, and we'll open it up for any questions that you may have before we move on to that section.
Next slide, please. Next slide, please. First thing is, can you hear me okay? Good. All right, good. Thanks, Brad. I'm going to talk a little bit about why FBI rather than do something else. We've had a lot of questions about that from some of you and also from the community, and we want to give you all the information that we have to help you make the best decision that you can. At the May 25th meeting, I talked a little. Next slide, please. At the May 25th meeting, I talked a little bit about what biosolids are, how the wastewater clarification process works, why we need to do this, and that if we don't remove biosolids from the clarification process, if we don't treat them, then we won't be able to discharge clean water into rivers and streams. And that's what this project is about. We need to be able to capture and treat biosolids from our treatment system so that we can comply with our permits and provide the community clean water that discharges in the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. Some key considerations that go into our decisions are where are the biosolids being generated. We talked about this last time. The vast majority of all our biosolids are generated at these two facilities, the Bissell Point plant and the Lee May plant. The scale and the variability of production, Trustee Wabi just raised a good question. Why does it vary so much? It's because of the kind of system that we operate and how it's connected to the overall community system that's associated with the flood wall. And because of that, our biosolids are much more dilute. Typical biosolids are 60 to 80% volatile content. Our biosolids are typically 40 to 55%, somewhere in that range. So much different than what you would see at a typical or traditional wastewater treatment plant. And so when we're looking at technologies to deal with all of those things, there's really two options in the industry right now for the kind of treatment that MSD would need to do at the scale we would need to do. And those two options are some type of incineration or anaerobic digestion. So I want to go into a little bit more detail on those two things today to talk about why we chose and why we're recommending what we're doing. So next slide, please.
Where she's there.
So the fluidized bed incineration process. First off, when we're talking about fluidized bed incineration, we're also bringing with that a disposal option. And so when you incinerate biosolids, you produce ash, and that ash is disposed in a landfill. MSD owns the landfill that we dispose the ash. So when you talk about anaerobic digestion, you're also talking about a process that includes some other disposal option. We're talking about, in this case, land application. That's the traditional model that you would use in an anaerobic digestion process. So let's talk about fluidized bed incineration first. You bring in raw solids from the clarifiers, and the first thing you do is dewater them. When you dewater, that's taking the water out of the material so that it can be fired, so it can be burned. Dewatered solids are typically in the 25% solids content, so that's a pretty dense material. Looks like thick chocolate cake. Then that material is taken into the fluidized bed incinerator. It's a fluidized bed incinerator. Basically, what the bed is like a bed of sand, and the cake material goes into the sand. The sand is super, super hot, about 1,500 degrees, and it all disintegrates almost instantaneously. When that happens, you get almost 100% elimination of all the organics. That's the output of that is a lot of heat and a complete mineralization of the biosolids. That heat that comes off the incineration process has to be processed in some way. So right now, the plan is to waste off the heat that's generated from that. But there could be options in the future to take that heat and convert it in some kind of energy. We've looked into those options. We can talk more about that. But that's at the next, because the next piece of the process is emissions treatment. You can't take all of that hot air and gas into your emissions treatment. You have
What fuel
Sure.
do you use to ignite the incinerator?
Natural gas is used to bring the reactor up to temperature, and then after that, then the process is almost self-combustion. So you use natural gas to get it hot,
right?
But after it gets hot, there's enough organic material in the biosolids to keep it going, and that's one of the major advantages of fluidized bed incineration over what we have now, the multiple hearth technology, is that LIME a significant, almost 95% plus, we think, reduction in natural gas usage, and at Bissell could be as much as 70%. So it would be much less natural gas production in the future compared to what we're doing now.
Jay, the combustion of that is also used in primary heat exchangers to preheat the material. So it's a constant loop reusing the heat that's generated by the biosolids.
Correct. We use the heat to keep the process going, keep it hot.
So it just goes back in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, my flow chart is pretty linear because I'm trying to keep it simple, but there's a lot of parts and pieces to this, yes. And then the emissions treatment occurs. It's a 3-stage process, effectively. You have scrubbers. The first stage, you can have kind of a description I have is kind of a shower on steroids. It's a lot of quenching water to cool it and to take off particles, to make it so that the next processes can work, which are the filters. So you have like HEPA filters, and then the last stage after the filter process is granular activated carbon. Very similar to what is used in drinking water treatment for removal of a lot of trace compounds, and then we need it for this case for removal of mercury. That's the primary reason, but it has a side benefit, and that is that granular activated carbon is a proven technology for removing PFAS, which is an emerging contaminant and something that's really on our minds. Any questions about that? Okay. So from benefits of the technology, we talked a little already about some of the benefits of the upgrade facilities, natural gas being one of them. Natural gas consumption is a huge benefit of this technology compared to what we have today. Reduction in air emissions, we're talking about at least a 70% reduction in air emissions, probably more because of how the the system's going to be operated and the throughputs that we're going to be putting through the system. We can process low volatile solids in variable quantities. This is a thermochemical process. We have a lot of control over how we operate it. And that's control that we don't have in a biological process necessarily. Not that biological process can't be run, but that thermochemical processes are very stable. And so we have a lot of control and experience with this. It fits on the existing land. This is a big factor. What you're going to see with these projects are building like what's in the lower left-hand corner of this incineration of this slide. We'll have 3 stacks just like this at both facilities. We won't need additional infrastructure or trucking to do this, and our ash will continue to be disposed at our MSD landfill. Everything works pretty much like it does now. It's just plug and play. We plop out the old multiple hearth process and we put in a fluidized bed process. It's a very promising destruction and treatment technology. This is an area where a lot of people are spending a lot of focus and hoping that we get to a good answer. There may be more answers down the road, but right now, what we know is that incineration is the only proven technology for destroying PFAS. And PFAS, to give you some perspective, what we're talking about, it's very ubiquitous. It's in makeup, it's in pharmaceuticals, it's in shampoos, it's in clothing, it's in so many things. And the levels that we're seeing coming out of the EPA and states in terms of regulations are in the parts per trillions. You know, for some perspective, parts per trillions, we're talking about 1 drop of water in 20 swimming pools, 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools. These are very, very small levels that we're being asked to treat down to. And there's just a lot of uncertainty about how that's going to happen and whether or not we're going to be able to do that with other types of treatment technologies. The last thing I want to mention is that it can be incorporated into energy or steam recovery type processes. So when we first started talking about this process, and we really thought that steam recovery was going to be a good option, partly because we had been having some discussions with some of our neighbors at the Bissell Point Treatment Plant, in particular Procter & Gamble, about whether or not they could benefit and we could work together on steam. And steam is probably the one piece of this that has the most promise. Ultimately, that didn't bear fruit. But that's not to say there won't be additional opportunities. And we're really looking into that. We recognize that there could be an opportunity here, and we're not going to quit looking for one. We're going to keep trying to find an opportunity to recover that heat and find a beneficial use for it. Any questions about fluidized bed incineration before I move forward? Okay.
Real quick.
Yeah.
So the current process, what do we use to start those fires?
Natural gas.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But this is going to be less, this will be a less.
Yeah, so right now we have to continually add natural gas to keep the hearth hot.
Gotcha.
And we won't have to do that in the future. There's a lot of heat loss in the existing process that requires us to keep adding heat. And that's what we won't have to do.
Jay, Craig, just so we get it back, there's a reason we have existing incinerators on those combined systems. So while they're not efficient, they were good technologies at the time. I think a lot of the reasons Jay's saying we're putting incinerators now are the same reason that incinerators were built in the 60s, because they had the same issue about what do you do with the sludge. And so again, we are just duplicating the technology that matched the product that we were having to treat.
Right. And Brian already mentioned this as well, but I want to reiterate the future CSO controls and future treatment that we'll be required to do on wastewater are really important factors in how we go about sizing and treating our biosolids.
Hey, Jay, don't lower your volume.
Oh.
Keep your volume up.
Can you hear me okay? Sorry.
He's going up.
All right, anaerobic digestion. So fluidized bed incineration, 100% of the organics go away to produce ash. Anaerobic digestion, you're going to transform about 50% of the organic material and raw solids into methane or natural gas. That's important because When we have biosolids, volatile content in the 30 to 40% range, at best, you're going to take it down to 20% range, right? And that's really difficult. That's difficult for the organisms that are going to be responsible for doing this process to accomplish. But I want to keep that in process. I'm going to talk about that, but I just want to keep that in mind, okay? So how does this work? In some respects, they're similar, but there are a couple of really key technical differences. First is they all have a dewatering process, but with the anaerobic digestion process, instead of going to producing a cake that's like that 25 to 30% solids content, you produce a cake that's probably 15%. Has a lot more water to it, much more viscous. Okay, that is then taken into what they call the thermal hydrolysis process, and it has basically 3 parts to it. The first part is on the left side is what we call a pulper. It's basically adding heat, getting the biosolids warmer, so they'll be for the next process, which is the steam vessel. So what the steam does is that it kills all the pathogens that are in the biosolids, and that's important because that's what we're trying to do is treat the wastewater. And then it basically changes the rheology or the consistency of the biosolids. So it turns it from something that looks like cake to something that looks kind of more like pudding. And that makes it easier to pump and easier to treat in the downstream anaerobic digestion process. And but in order to do that, you have to add a lot of steam, a lot of heat into that pressure vessel, right? So when you have organic matter that's in the 60 to 80% range, which is typical for a wastewater process, that's not a combined sewer system connected to a flood wall on the Mississippi River, then you can do that, and it turns into that nice pudding that you can move into the process. When you have material like we do that has low volatile content and higher inorganic material and lots of mud, then that material change, the rheology change doesn't happen like that. And it becomes thicker and more difficult to move. And it could cause safety issues in the operation of these vessels, because if you can't move the material out of the vessel effectively becomes plugged, right? And so that's one of our concerns, is that we would need to really look into this and have a much more robust design than where we are today to feel comfortable that the THP process with our low volatile solids that have all that mud can be processed effectively. We have our doubts. So that's the THP process. After that pudding is formed, then the next process is just a traditional anaerobic digestion process where biology uses methanogenic conditions, low oxygen conditions, to take the organic material and produce methane out of the organic material. That methane is captured, it's transferred to the different processes that are used to keep the THP process going, or it could be converted to the biogas for energy. And that's where a lot of folks in the industry are looking as how do you make gas, natural gas, in a quantity and that's where that occurs, is in the anaerobic digestion process. After you digest the material, get about 50% of the solids out, or 50% of the organics out, you still have to go through another dewatering process to get it down to about 25% cake. That's what gets loaded onto trucks or put into a storage facility for later a land application program. So you produce what they call Class A cake. Class A means that it meets the highest classification that EPA currently has for biosolids. That being said, this process does not remove PFAS. There's not any evidence at this point to suggest that it does. And so because it doesn't get to the same temperatures that the incineration process does. And so you have to do something with that cake. You have to do something with it. The traditional model is to land apply it. And so that's what our base assumption is when we're looking at comparison of processes and alternatives.
Can't you just put it in the landfill like you do the ash?
The question is, can we put it in the landfill, the cake? You can put it in the landfill. For some comparison though, and I'll talk about this in a second, the ash is about 1/4 the quantity of the solids. So if you if you are disposing of biosolids, you're going to pay 4 times as much for disposal. It's going to take 4 times as much volume in the landfill.
But we own the landfill.
We could not take it to that landfill. So when you have permits for landfills, they're very specific about what material you can take, and we couldn't take digestive biosolids into our existing landfill. We would have to take that to another private facility.
Speech.
Okay. A little bit more about anaerobic digestion and with the THP process. One thing, it would be a new treatment process for us.
Should we be on the next?
Oh, yeah, flip, please. Yes. It would be a new process for us. Not that we couldn't get up to speed with THP, but it is something that's new. And something, like I've said, because of the different, it's not off the shelf for MSD because of the issues with the low volatile solids and the higher inorganic content. I've already talked about the organic content. I've already talked about the THP process. Biological processes just by inherently are more prone to be upset than a thermochemical process. I think everybody can appreciate that probably. They just can be. Something comes into the system that shouldn't be there. The biology upsets. The process goes down, and we can't treat wastewater. That's a big deal, right? And so we have a lot more control over this. And if we were in a system that had stable flows and stable characteristics, we'd have a different conversation. But we don't have that at Bissell or Lime. Process footprint. This bottom left-hand corner picture is a schematic of what City of Kansas City is going to be building at the Blue River Treatment Facility. There's been a lot of discussion about what's different about Kansas City. One of those things I want to point out, not only have the building, but you see those big towers behind that. Those are the anaerobic digestion vessels. It's a much bigger footprint. The process footprint for this, especially at Lime, we don't have the land for that right now. We would have to acquire land to be able to have that. And this isn't enough. This doesn't even give the scale, really. The scale of the process that we would need at Lime would be much bigger than what Kansas City is going to build in terms of aerial footprint. So that's a big concern of ours, how we would get the additional land and whether or not that's even makes the project, infeasible if you couldn't get the land. In addition to the land just for the treatment process, you're going to need land for the storage of the biosolids. Biosolids are not something that are land applied year round. They're done in a very finite period of time. You apply it as a fertilizer when there aren't crops in the ground. So that's going to be in the fall and October, November time period. You're going to have to be able to load them and transport them. It's going to require a special unloading facility. Picture a big warehouse with 4 or 5 trucks, bays, continually being loaded. That's what we're talking about in order to have that kind of system. It's a pretty big operation. And then you're going to need the land to be able to land apply, and we'll talk about that in just a second, and be able to control odors year round because you're going to be storing biosolids year round. We don't have a land application program right now. So that's something that we would have to develop. The other utilities of our size that do this, they've spent years developing those programs. And it's something we're just not prepared to do at the moment. We talked about PFAS already. And the one thing, I tip my hat to the folks that are looking at ways to incorporate and recover natural gas out of the THP process or out of the anaerobic digestion process. I think the industry is looking at ways that this can be helpful. It's just not a good fit for us right now. So we got the processes, right? And then the second piece is the disposal piece. Next slide, please. So
I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure, good.
Can we go back to the THP process? You said part of the problem is we don't have enough organic stuff,
right,
to go into the system and make it effective or efficient. Is there ways to access that? I mean, aren't there farms and isn't there ways to do that it's not just us.
Right.
If we're looking at a regional approach, which I think we should, maybe there's other organics that we can get
Yeah,
Because they're going to
yeah.
have these problems too.
Sure. To your question about, can we get enough organic material? I think the scale of the issue is the problem. Like the amount of material that we would need to get from others to be able to make that work, to make the volatile contents up, it's significant.
Jay, if I'm not mistaken, 1/3 of the biosolids created in the state come through the Lima and Bissell treatment plant. So think about the sources you would need to even consider something like that. That's kind of addressing the scale that Jay's talking about.
And the problem is exacerbated when we are producing the most biosolids. That's part of the problem too.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. Next slide, please. Okay. So with ash lime filling, nothing changes. We continue landfill in the ash. You have lower material volume. Already talked about that. It's 1/4 of the material that you would just have to dispose of if you went to digestion. We're concentrating. If to the extent that we need to deal with PFAS in the landfill, it's in one place, and we can treat it. We can deal with it there. Then, on contrast to that, land application, like I said, we don't have a program right now. We don't land apply. We're going to need about 6,000 acres. I apologize that this chart's a little small, but for some perspective, 6,000 acres is a pretty good chunk of the land between I-55 and I-44 in the city of St. Louis. That's a lot of land. It's a significant amount of land that we would need to access somewhere to be able to land apply this material.
I'm not sure that the proposal that Illinois Water is discussing was a land application.
It doesn't talk about
we don't really know what it is.
That's the thing. It's a concept, and it doesn't talk about what that is, right? And so to your point, it doesn't. We don't really know what they're planning.
Require land application, then doesn't that make a lot of the logic that's here moot?
Well, understand, Jay's assuming that technology would actually work for our biosolids.
Right.
Jay's assuming this 6,000 that it does, and we've already demonstrated we don't think it does.
Well, what I'm saying, that they don't require, if this proposal doesn't require land application, then the need for a partner and 6,000.
So one of the things that's in their concept letter is that, hey, we think there's tax credits available for doing this, right? So in order to be eligible for those tax credits, you have to show net carbon decrease, right?
Right.
So one of the questions that we think makes it really challenging to make, if you go take the digested solids and put them into a landfill, that makes those net CO2 calculations much more challenging. And I'm not sure that you can. And so that's part of our assumption of land application is that if you're going to land apply, you might be able to meet those credits. If you go into a landfill, I'm not sure you can.
Okay. But we're going to have a conversation with these guys, right?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I'll talk about where we're at with them at the end.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Next slide, please. Cost comparison. There's been a lot of discussion about cost and that the anaerobic digestion with THP would cost less than what we're proposing. We do not believe that's the case. We think that fluidized bed incineration, the capital cost associated with fluidized incineration is less than the cost of anaerobic digestion with THP. And those costs, that $1.1 to $1.3 billion capital cost for the digestion with THP doesn't include what we would need to do in terms of additional land purchase or the land application program that would follow that. The other piece of this is from a regulatory standpoint that, with the FBI, with landfilling, we're ready to go. We have the permits. We can build it. We can construct it. They've signed off on the project. With anaerobic digestion with land application, they haven't. And we have some significant constraints. One of those is the distance that we can haul for land application. Our permits require us to land apply within a 20-mile radius of each treatment plant. That puts us at a significant disadvantage. And I think that if you look at the history of that requirement, that's driven by a lot of stakeholder concern from other folks about not wanting to see sludge land applied way out and away from where it came from, right? So I don't know that that's a requirement that we could change. That's a significant consideration. We've got restrictions on when you can apply it. With ash, you can take it to the landfill pretty much whenever you want to. With anaerobic digestion and land application, you're restricted in when you can land apply.
But again, if they're not land applying, then those concerns go away.
The land application.
Or generate new concerns.
And I'm for what I'm talking about right now, Trustee Wabi, is not necessarily. I'm not talking about the Illinois American Water proposal. I'm talking about if we were to do this on our own.
Right.
So if we were to do this on our own, these are the things that we'd have to consider and take into account. And then the last thing, of course, is the PFAS, the issue with PFAS and emerging contaminants and land applied sludge. So,
well, and Jay, it's not just land applied sludge, it's also the use of sludge for other commercial purposes. Still the same, help me out, the digested sludge, whatever you do with that, not just landfilling, but any commercial purpose and distributing that kind of chemical.
Right. And I can't reiterate, I mean, I think that if you don't include the land application component, I don't see how a project could be viable under the Inflation Reduction Act for tax credits. So that's our opinion. Okay. Trustee Wabi's question, should we partner with Illinois American Water? Next slide, please. Okay, so what do we have? We have an early stage concept. We don't have a lot of details. We have a lot of questions about this. And importantly, there's no commitment in this letter. It's just an idea. And we're happy to have the conversation and talk with them about it, but that we have a lot of questions that would need to be run to ground before we could come up with an agreement. So one of the major questions we have is how would we get the material to wherever it's going to be treated? There wasn't a location, so we don't know where they're going to treat it. If you basically have two options for moving sludge. You can move it in a pipeline or you can truck it. And trucking is the thing that we could do right away, the soonest, right? And right now, if we were to do that, we don't have a way to get the cake out of the Bissell treatment plant or the Lime treatment plant to be able to take it somewhere else. The flow process is naturally designed to go right into the incinerators. So we don't have a way to get that. So there'd be a project for that. Also, our dewatering material or dewatering equipment is designed to take the cake up to 25%. And if you recall, the THP process requires 15%. So it's probably going to require different dewatering equipment too. There's cost associated with it. There's engineering and design, construction costs associated with all those things. Just the hauling alone, if we stay within that 20-mile radius, is $6 to $9 million a year ongoing cost. Odor and nuisance hazards, 40 to 60 trucks of raw sludge. We will have odor complaints and nuisance complaints about that. It's natural. And all the trucking has a greenhouse gas component to it. In fact, our analysis is that hauling component is the biggest piece of GHG in the process. And I don't know how that works with the tax credit calculations because it's something that would have to be built into that. Also, a regional facility, the issues with PFAS still are there, and how we go about land application or disposal. Those issues weren't addressed in the letter, so I don't have any information about that. That's a significant question, though, about what we would do. Here's what I would say: there is a process. It's called the
next slide.
The next slide,
next slide, please. There is a process for the public having input on this sort of thing, on this sort of plan, and also having those discussions with regulators and public officials. And it's called the Clean Water Act 208 Regional Water Quality Plan. And our recommendation is that if we were going to move forward with some kind of regional facility, it would need to be consistent with that regional plan. Every other treatment facility that MSD plans to operate in the near future is a permanent facility in that 208 plan. And anything that we would want to do in the future, I think should also be part of that plan. So what does that plan process look like? You'd have to develop a plan, meet with your state regulators and other officials about what that looks like. Then you would need to submit it, request a modification, get approval and recommendation from East West Gateway, and then it would go into the state agencies. There's a process in Missouri. There's a process in Illinois. Those would be parallel processes, including and up to the governors of each state and then the EPA regional administrators. And the best case outcome for something like that, and that's assumes that everybody's on the same page, and I'm not sure everybody will be because of some of the issues we've talked about, hauling and whatnot, is at least 5 years for something like that. And our facilities just don't have the time. They don't have the life yet to go through that process. And so that process alone makes me think that this concept is something that we can talk about and we will talk about with Illinois American Water, but it's not a replacement for the fluidized bed incineration project. We are still going to need FBI facilities to handle our sludge.
Would it be I don't know, could we do half and half?
Yeah, I
Can
was
we
going to
do
cover
a-
that. I'll take care of it.
Brian's going to talk about it
Okay.
potentially. With that, I'm going to pass it to Tim Snow.
All right, thanks, Jay. I'm just going to talk a little bit about financing incentives. I know a question came up about whether or not we've considered federal funding available. And of course, we're always on the lookout for additional sources of funding for our projects. We talk about them a lot in our meetings here today. Just since the consent decree was put in place, well, let me start. For the most part, historically, the only real federal assistance that has been available consistently is our ability to issue tax-exempt bonds. So investors buy the bonds, they do not have to pay taxes on the interest they receive, so they accept a lower rate from us, but the federal government is foregoing taxes on those. So that is a form of federal assistance. We have received some COVID funding recently that's relatively small, but we were not eligible for a lot of the funding that was available in some of those plans. We were able to offset some of the increased cleaning costs that we had. We work with the Corps of Engineers. I think since the beginning of the consent decree, we've gotten roughly 30 million of projects done by the Corps that we didn't have to pay for. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Act that came out recently did not provide any funds directly for MSD, but it did increase funding available through state SRF programs. We talked about SRF earlier in the finance meeting. That's a great low-cost way for us to fund projects. As a matter of fact, the fluidized bed incinerators, we have $260 million on the current intended use plan for the fluidized bed incinerators. We are currently talking to the EPA, who runs a program called WIFIA, which we've talked about in here before as well, low-cost funding for another $330 million. And then we've just seen recently the draft intended use plan for next year from the SRF. And it's on the contingency list because they would have to go outside and raise money, sell bonds to fund it. But the SRF program has indicated their willingness to fund the rest of the project, even the entire fluidized bed incinerator project with state revolving fund loans, which is a big deal. We looked at the little bit, the $35 million we're going to borrow saves $20 million of financing costs. This is exponentially more, and it would be much bigger savings on the financing side. Another program that's come up recently is American Rescue Plan. Again, that was a program designed specifically for infrastructure, but not designed to get money directly to MSD as a political subdivision. We are not eligible for direct funds, so we could not apply to the government for funds. The state got an allocation, and the state created a grant process. We did apply. I'm not sure how much we applied for, but I think we got 30 to 35 million of grants for some stormwater.
We got like 27 million. The max we could get for wastewater was 5 million, and we got that. The other 22 million we got from the stormwater program.
Okay, so that was a program, again, not available to MSD, but the state got allocation. We applied to the state for some of those funds and got, almost $30 million, which will help. But that program is now closed. They've allocated the grants they had available for wastewater and stormwater. So then let's talk about the Inflation Reduction Act. The Inflation Reduction Act mostly provides additional funding through tax credits. Tax credit programs generally are not helpful to MSD because we do not pay taxes. However, there are some mechanisms in this particular program that provide what's called direct pay. And so tax exempt entities, rather than get a tax credit, can get a direct pay. Now it's a reimbursement, so all the upfront costs of a project still have to happen, and then a payment could come later, but there are certain qualifications for the program. So for the things that we would be eligible for, generally, we would have to generate energy in order to be eligible for those tax credits. So we're talking about natural gas or electricity. The natural gas portion that we could be eligible for only applies if we can start construction by the end of 2024. So you're talking about a whole new, regulatory needs, procurement needs, design, all within less than 18 months. So we do not think that's feasible and that we can be eligible for any of those tax credits. For projects that are constructed after in 2025 or later, the requirement would be electricity generation, which is possible, but any change from the scope that we are currently talking about is added costs. And we don't believe the full project would be eligible for these credits. So we would be able to subsidize the additional costs, but our expectation would be that it's still a net cost increase for us to do, to add those components. They can still be added. They can still be added. They could be added now. They could be added later. But our expectation is that it would be a net additional cost. Since the majority of our project costs are in wastewater treatment.
Tim, net additional cost over the $900 million?
Correct, because the 900 million right now is just to meet our needs for wastewater treatment.
Okay.
So if we wanted to generate electricity or natural gas or do something else, we'd have to increase the scope of the project. We think those costs could be subsidized by these tax credits, but I don't think they would completely offset.
Gotcha.
It might depend on how much you generate. So there might still be some open questions there, but generally, this is not something that we believe would lower the cost of our current estimate.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. And then again, that credit value, so I think we've heard that we could maybe get up to 40%. The general base rate is 30%. There are some incentives that could increase that. Things related to Buy American, apprentice program, so it could go up from there. But also, if you finance with tax exempt debt, which we would do because that's a huge savings for us, it would lower the credit some too. So that full a 30 or 40% is not, but our expectation would be even if we were able to fund our project with those tax credits. So, I'll just add, we do work with. We don't have, since we don't pay taxes, we don't have any tax experts here. So we go outside, we rely on our bond counsel, we rely on our auditor, we rely on our municipal advisor, we rely on water industry and other partners as well, just to help educate us about these things. So these are conversations that we have every time there's a new program out, and that's just kind of a summary of what is available to us. Generally there's, unfortunately, it's not much. Any questions about any of those programs or what might be available? All right, then I am going to turn it over to Brett.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Tim. And good morning, trustees. And I promise we're close to the end here, okay? So why do this project now? As you look at our facilities are old. As you've heard talked about from Jay or from Brian and others here, these facilities were built in the 60s. It doesn't include just incineration, although that's what everybody, is focusing on here. It also includes our dewatering equipment and a lot of the ancillary equipment that also supports the incineration process. So these systems are very old. It's time to replace them. The length of the project to install the incinerators and get the new fluidized bed incineration process up to speed ties into when we feel these systems are at the end of their useful life. There is also, with our the current air emission standards that we operate under with our multiple hearth incineration process currently, actually puts restrictions on us on the amount of rehabilitation that we can do to the systems. And the EPA did that purposefully because they wanted to drive entities like us out of using multiple hearth incineration. They wanted to drive them to other processes. So we've hit our limit, and that's one of the drivers here. You've heard Jay talk about it. We want to continue having stellar permit compliance with our discharge permits. When I give my semi-annual report, you'll see the treatment plants almost have perfect compliance, and I'm hopefully looking forward to the Bissell treatment plant this year having perfect compliance because we have our trickling filters back in operation. So hopefully all the plants can hit it. But we want to make sure that we continue to have stellar permit compliance. And then lastly here, the big driver for a CD modification that actually extended our consent decree to 2039 was the timing of this project. And that's what was presented to the EPA. And that was the basis for them giving us the CD modification. So if you go to the next slide. And we went over this at the last program management meeting. Our recommendation is to proceed with the upgrade to the incineration process, the solid handlings processes, and all the ancillary equipment that goes with it. We feel this is the best solution from a cost standpoint, from a socio-environmental standpoint, to serve our ratepayers in the best way that we see fit. This project will handle all the biosolids from all of our treatment plants. Currently, the only treatment plant that is not being serviced by Bissell or Lime is the Missouri River treatment plant. All other solids from the other treatment plants come there. It really addresses our aging infrastructure there. Like I mentioned, again, these facilities were built in the 60s into the early 70s, and it's time to replace them. Jay's mentioned, Brian's mentioned, we've all mentioned multiple times, this really is a benefit from the technology that we're proposing here with the fluidized bed incineration to greatly reduce the amount of pollutants that we're putting into the air. And I think we need to keep that in mind. And it also, allows us by scheduling this project now and completing this project now, it makes sure that we adhere to our permits. And that ends my comments, and I'm going to turn it over to Brian for some closing comments.
Just go ahead and go to questions. Okay. So to close, I just want to leave the trustees with a few thoughts. Some of those about things, mostly things that are kind of ancillary to what you already heard. First, when this is done, we're going to encourage, if you really want to dive into this deeper, Jay had mentioned a technical document that dives deeper than this presentation. We're going to forward that to the Board of Trustees this afternoon. We're also going to be making it available to the public this afternoon. Whoever, whether they've asked for it or not, we are going to make sure it's available and everybody can be able to take a look at everything we presented and a little more of the background. Excuse me. Second, just for the Board of Trustees, we are aware that we have sent some responses to an alderman and a city and a county councilman. In addition to those, we've committed to them that once they've looked at all this information, if they feel they need to have a meeting with us, let us know. I agree. What we sent Friday was part of the story. The rest is the other information I indicated we'd submit this afternoon. And we will continuously keep offering. If they want to meet with us to discuss this, let us know. We have not met with any of them so far. All our correspondence has been by written correspondence. But we'll follow through with that if we get asked any questions. Hitting on the thing that Jay talked about, this is the one that I think about, and Jay kind of hit on a little bit. Besides, as he had mentioned, taking dewatered sludge and hauling 50 trucks per day through the St. Louis area, I think we also need to think about the receiving area. It's going to receive 50 trucks of St. Louis sludge every day on their local roads and wherever they're going to go that. I think we need to think about that as well. So with that, I think one thought on the regional idea, we would like to discuss the idea with Illinois American, because it's not just one regional facility. Maybe there should be two regional facilities. both MSD's new incinerators and Illinois American's digested sludge system. So it's available in the area with two different technologies to meet two different needs. There is a small portion of MSD sludge production that if the PFAS issue can be addressed, there's about 10 to 15%, Trustee Wabi, you're asking about the share. There's about 10 or 15% if we could get back the PFAS issue that probably would be eligible to be treated at a regional facility, at least the idea that's been expressed to us by Illinois American. It would create then, in addition, based on the incinerations, would give us additional capacity at the incinerators. I'm sure there are probably other folks along the river having some of the same issues that we are, that digestion is not their chosen method. We could create capacity to maybe accept some of that. And so I'm thinking of a two-facility regional solution to maybe what's there. I'm just thinking out loud right now, but that is one of the things we want to talk to Illinois American. At this time, we don't really know what their thoughts are. We know their customer base in the state of Illinois and state of Missouri significantly lower just than our customer base for wastewater systems. However, their business model is to try and acquire other smaller systems. So what I just talked about, we don't really know. I think a discussion with Illinois American on the idea of let's take care of everything, not just one. Maybe the regional solution is bigger than that. It doesn't exclude us building our facility, but I think that's something we need to talk to them about. That's one of the things we will. Let's see. I think I asked, Trustee Wabi, you asked, so we are scheduled to meet with Illinois American / Missouri American Water on the issue. They weren't able to meet this week. Between their schedule and our schedule, between their schedule and our stuff with the Rate Commission, we finally landed on Thursday afternoon before the board meeting. That's the first time folks could get together. And we could take their idea, they'll have all our stuff, and we can start having a discussion about what we think the possibilities in the future are with the idea that Illinois American has of some kind of a regional facility.
Do you want us to vote that afternoon?
We are scheduled right now because of the now, again, what I just mentioned doesn't actually, the construction of the incinerators would be towards that ends. But right now we are scheduled to do it. Where we're sitting right now, the contractor's bid expires July 16th. We have waited a couple months and we've pushed this as far as the bid from the contractors as far along as it can go. I think we've always made a commitment as part of a capital program, as part of the diversity program, to allow the local population that's paying for this to benefit from it, whether it's working order or providing some of the construction. I don't know what happens if we go to a facility outside of MSD's boundaries. I'm not sure what that looks like. We will consider, as they were mentioning, energy efficiency funding. There are, as Tim mentioned, there's not a whole lot that's in the bill, bipartisan infrastructure law or the Inflation Reduction Act. There are some things that maybe might match up or that might actually be cost effective. There is the idea of some kind of energy generation still coming off the new incinerators, the thing we've put to the side. We're kind of looking at that. We continuously, and I've forced Brett to do this again, there's a potential for funding that we start becoming a solar panel farm. We have some space that might be worth that. Brett's looking into what that looks like. We've regularly looked at that idea because we have space at some of our plants. Whether or not there's any funding to assist that, I don't know. Brett's kind of the one ramrodding that and trying to get answers from the folks who have those kind of funds. So, and there's another one. This happens to us regularly. Either we have a good cost savings idea with other utilities, or other utilities have some for us. So they haven't said what it is, but another utility has approached us in this same area about wanting to have a meeting to discuss some ideas. And so we'll be pursuing that as well. So I didn't want to leave you that we're just moving forward. I think Tim laid out a lot of places where we're using outside funding and trying to be cost effective. We'll still be looking at these things like we always have. And Trustee Nikozison, staff is done unless there's questions, correct? Yes.
No questions? Next tentative meeting date, August 1st, 2023. Can I get a motion for adjournment?
I'll move.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.